Right, so good morning everybody and welcome to our first overview and scrutiny committee for the Family and Children's Services of 2025. This meeting we extended an invite to the Health and Wellbeing Overview and Scrutiny Committee members. I know there are some members who sit on both Family and Children's Services and that who are present this morning, and that was for item number 4, which is on the agenda. So what we are going to do, first of all, is welcome Steve Bird to this meeting. You're standing in at the moment for Lynn Houghton, and I think you're representing the NESUWT trade union. Okay, so welcome to this, and I hope you find this meeting useful. So if we start by looking at the agenda for this morning, so if I can first of all take any apologies for absence.
I've received apologies from Councillor Chicken and Councillor Renner Thompson.
Thank you. And the minutes of the meeting held in November. Does anyone have any comments on the accuracy of those minutes, which are contained in your report 11 to 18? I'm not seeing any indication of that, so with your permission, I'll sign those off as an accurate record for the minutes of that meeting. Oh, sorry, yeah.
I think that's working. Good morning, colleagues. I have no issue with the accuracy. In fact, I would just wondered if it's okay, Chair, to clarify a comment that my colleague Lynn Houghton made at that meeting. So I think it's on page 14, colleagues. Lynn Houghton read a statement, and I've actually listened back to the recording, the YouTube recording of the meeting, and it is clear that Lynn Houghton read a statement that implied that it had come from trade union colleagues. That statement, colleagues, came from the NASUWT and no other union. So any inference that she was talking on behalf of all trade unions, apologies for that. That is not the case. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, we will amend them accordingly.
I'm not sure you can amend the minutes because that is what was minuted, but if you can add some
clarification.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, colleagues.
So we then come on to the standing item number 3, disclosures of members' interests. We all have our interests declared on a public register on the council website. Is there anything additional that anybody wants to bring to my attention this morning for this morning's meeting? Mr. Bird.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I have recorded an interest in item 9, which is the report about the situation in the Berwick Schools Partnership. I'm employed within that partnership. Declared my interest, I've submitted the forms to Leslie. I will not be commenting on that item. Thank you.
Thank you for noting that. Okay, so we now come on to the substantive part of this morning's meeting, the agenda items, number 4, which is the annual report of the Northumberland Children and Adult Safeguarding Partnership. In your report, it's contained on pages 19 to 70, and this report is going to be taken by Neil and Audrey. So I think, Neil, you're going to introduce... Sorry, Anna Watson, did you want to...
I just want to make a point on this, and I want to do this now. This is 5 chunky reports we've got in this agenda pack, and I just want to say, when you receive an agenda pack on a Thursday with the best will in the world to read and digest all of this information and do proper scrutiny to it, I think it just needs to be noted that I think this is too much in one session, and we haven't had a meeting since November. And so I would just like it to be noted, because there will be a lot of us that are trying to go through quite lengthy, wordy reports that in the best will of the world we can't have possibly digested it all. So I think it just needs to be noted, because on the previous meeting, there were 4 chunky reports due to come in January, but one was actually the principal social worker report. There's 2 additional reports come to this meeting that we haven't had prior notice to, and I think that just needs to be commented on.
And we have reduced the number of things which come to this scrutiny committee, taking on board that, but unfortunately the way that this sits on the cycle, these have to come to us. Did you want to add anything else to Audrey?
Thank you, Chair. So it's a really relevant comment, and we were conscious that these were big reports. Because of timing, we've got them this time round, but I am working with Rebecca, particularly around the overall annual schedule. And it's not about, for me, it's not about just saying this needs to come here. It's about the size and depth of report and scrutiny that's required. So Rebecca and I will agree. We understand that it's a work in progress, but I commit to make sure that we get that balanced for the committee, and happy for you to continue to just give us that feedback.
Point noted. So on that, we'll move over to Neil, I think, who's going to introduce item number 4, and then we'll have some comment from Audrey as well, and then we'll take some questions. So over to you, Neil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, Audrey and I will do a double act on this one, but I'm going to start off. We've got a presentation to run you through. When Audrey and I were having a look at the presentation over the last couple of days, we've realised we think only the NHS has more acronyms than safeguarding has. So we are going to put a glossary together to come out with the presentation when we send it around to everybody, but you will be supplied it after the meeting today. So. Okay, just to start to get into the background to this then. So this is the second annual report that we've produced for the Northumberland Children and Adult Safeguarding Partnership. And as a reminder, this partnership only came into being on the 1st of April last year. So prior to that, we had 2 separate boards. We had an Adult Safeguarding Partnership and a Children's Safeguarding Partnership. And it was a conscious decision to bring the 2 together because we were seeing such similar themes transcending both parts of the business that we're dealing with here. So we've made that change. And the other point just to make on this slide as well is this is a statutory requirement. This isn't an optional thing that we bring here. We think it's a really positive report to bring, and we think it's good to share this information, but we are instructed to do this by law. So we're meeting that statutory duty by bringing this here today and to the Health and Wellbeing Board and the other forums that we take it to. Just a little bit of a recap on what NCASP is, and I will use the phrase NCASP now, if that's all right, rather than the full title of Northumberland Children's and Adult Safeguarding Partnership. As I say, it's our fulfilment of the statutory responsibility to bring together 3 partner organisations in law to ensure the safeguarding and welfare of adults and children's adults and children across Northumberland. The 3 statutory partners are the local authority, it is the ICB, and it is the police. Now, there are a number of other partners that we will involve in the process of safeguarding, the acute trusts, you could just CNTW, the police, fire, schools, care providers, etc. But the statutory partners are stated up there, and it is the chief execs of each organisation that is the legal lead for that. They delegate that responsibility down, as is normally the case, and Audrey and I take the lead for the local authority in terms of that delegation. The Director of Nursing at the ICB, Richard Scott, takes it on for the NHS, and the police have Sam Renison as their lead within this structure. It obviously is bringing together partners to look at this from a strategic level. Operational safeguarding is quite different, and obviously happens through things like the MASH, which you'll be aware of, the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, and work that takes place within children's services, adult services, the NHS, frontline teams, etc. But this is the strategic view of it and what we're trying to deliver within Northumberland. And we have a set of documented arrangements which are available on the web. And at the end of the presentation, we've got a number of links to key documents as well, so you'll be able to flick to those when you get the presentation afterwards, which sets out the terms of how we'll work together to deliver this agenda. There's a quick view of the structure chart there, just for kind of how we manage this and how we piece it together. So there is an executive group at the top. That is the statutory body that fulfills the law. But underneath that, we need various forums and working groups to be able to do the business of what we want to do here. So there was previously, at the point this was drafted, which shows how fluid it is, there was a children's business group and an adults business group that took responsibility for delivering the strategy that's set by the executive group. We've merged those now. We found there were so many themes that were coming out within the 2 groups that crossed over both sides, and we'll touch on some of those when we get into the later slides, that they've been merged into one group to look at the business together. And then you can see there's a number of working groups underneath there, some of which are joint and some of which are separate, where they clearly only relate to one area of work. But there's a performance management group that's joint in there, there's a practice learning group that's joint, but then there's a children's safeguarding practice review group which clearly just targets children's is an issue within that. So, but that's the overall structure and how we piece it together. And then there's a strategic plan, which again you'll get a link to when the presentation comes out. But that strategic plan sets out our key priorities for the coming period. It's a 3-year plan, so it's 2023 to 26 at the minute, and that will be refreshed as we approach 2026. But the 4 strategic drivers are for NCASP to provide strategic leadership, set the strategic agenda and provide strong governance, which is the first column there, to act on and embed learning from case reviews and other learning that we get from other areas, including thematic reviews, national issues that arise and guidance from government, etc. We have a strategic driver to have scrutiny within the partnership. We have an independent scrutineer, who is Sue Kirkley, who provides challenge to the department, sitting outside of it. We review governance. There have actually been external inspections this year as well. So as I'm sure you're aware, Ofsted were in and inspected children's services, and safeguarding was a key theme of that inspection. And we hope very, very soon to get the outcome of the CQC inspection of adult services. And again, safeguarding was a key theme within that inspection, and the report that comes out on that will provide a view on where CQC felt adult social care was operating in Northumberland in terms of its approach to safeguarding and what it was delivering there. I'm going to hand over to Audrey for the next few slides, and then I'll come back later.
Thank you, Neil. So just picking up, thinking about our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements, it's all of the partners' responsibilities to contribute to these plans and discussions. The slides have a lot of information on, and the core, the central aspect of the slide, what we've done, sits within the report. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but I will highlight some of the areas of focus. So particularly our key areas and themes, the risks outside of the home and the extra-familial harm. Thinking about the work that we've done, the focus and why we chose that as an area and needed to understand. Remember that our choices are not because we choose them, they are evidence-based. So we take where we've got reviews, actions that come out of reviews, we collate those together and they become our strategic themes that we work on. And we were working on those and developing those over time. So you'll see them in a theme from last year's report and also moving forward into next year's report. So that multi-agency partnership approach, really, really key. Our contextual safeguarding, so it isn't just about what we as children's services do within the home, within the school, within agency operations. Contextual is about where it happens absolutely everywhere in the community, how it links together with school, with home, with community life. So we look at all of those aspects. So our approach is to understand and respond and think about the harm that could potentially be experienced beyond families. Another area of focus is, again, our multi-agency practice, thinking about how, again, we bring together, so we're having a singular conversation rather than a silo-based conversation, and then thinking about the particular vulnerabilities of some of our disabled children, those who are much more vulnerable and potentially at a greater risk, then that's a focus for us. So we've given you in the report some highlights of things that we've already done. So we've got a number, and Neil's highlighted in the structure, of both subgroups and working groups who work on particular themes. We're also responding, I should say very clearly, to the working together regulations that came in December 2023. So ensuring that we are making sure we're up to date with that our systems and processes are responding, and that all of our partners beyond the strategic partners. So I'm talking about our schools, all of our partners, all of our organisations, some of the organisations that we commission work with, we ensure that they are also informed and part of the development work, and we bring everybody together to do that work. So some of the work that we've highlighted we continue to need to do is bringing our strategic executive group delivery plan together. I would say actually that the Northern Area Commander from the police chairs that. So it is not council centric. We do a rotation around that work as well. We want to make sure that we're looking at our training offer, so continually reviewing and refreshing, making sure that organisationally we are able to support the broader partnership so they have an understanding, and it helps I guess the level of absorption within any organisation so that all staff understand their role within safeguarding. Really want to continue and focus the work with our disabled children and young people. The implementation of PREM, so that was previously called our Strategic Exploitation Group. It's now, it's so new, I have to check it, our Partnership Reduction, Exploitation and Missing. So there is no test for you at the end of this around acronyms, but Neil is absolutely right in terms of the number. It is a lot to remember. And particularly, we need to think about how we improve our working relationship and partnership links with the Safer Northumberland group so that we've got a conversation in one place that's understood by both groups. Again, Sam Rennison chairs the Safer Northumberland partnership, so there's a brilliant link across there. It means that there's not two streams of work. We are joined up and much more effective and efficient in that work. I would just note as well, and it's really relevant because I'm sure that you will have read press today and may have heard that there was a question yesterday, particularly posed from Holly Newton's family around the domestic abuse threshold. So I just wanted to reference that because without doubt, this working group around risks outside of the home and that extra-familial harm, that will be a discussion point that we will pick up. So we are really dynamic in terms of being able to respond and understand the context in which we are all working for our children and adults. Next slide, Neil. I feel a little like Professor Whitty saying that. Our next key area of theme was complex mental health. So again, thinking about how we consider trauma-informed practice. You as a committee will have heard that term in a number of areas. So in particular, when our virtual school and our children's social care annual report comes, we very much focus our areas around trauma-informed practice. The early help prevention work and the focus that we'll have moving forward will particularly link in with this. And so that trauma-informed will be a key theme that you will continue to hear moving forward. All of our tiers of intervention, making sure we get the right support at the right time in particular, and I know a number of members have come to us throughout the year around support for mental health for residents, whether that's in adults or whether that's children or families combined, then we make sure that we're able to respond to that. We talk an awful lot in this committee about families as well as just children. So I don't want everybody to think that we only focus on the children. We actually have a work stream thinking very carefully about how we work with parental mental health, where they are particularly a family who have some complex challenges or children who have needs that are really difficult and complex. And actually this approach means that we're able to consider the family in the round so that our services and support are tailored to meet their particular needs. And then again, picking up around our disabled children with complex mental health needs and also within our residential setting. So those are our areas of focus. It's really important, and I've talked about training, that we are able to evaluate the impact. And again, we talk an awful lot, and you'll hear that from future reports, about understanding the impact of the decisions that we make and the way that we work together. And so actually we want to do a bit more work around that and make sure we are really focused and really clear. We want to think really carefully about who's going to lead on this priority. And it may be that you think immediately health leads on it, but actually the local authority and our broadest, widest services have a really large voice in this around help shape what health can support us with in this area. And we'll continue to ensure that the trauma-informed awareness and strength-based practice is embedded in all training subjects. So our training offer is broader, wider, deeper, and it's accessible, and that they are conversations that we're currently having as to how we can extend that. Next slide, please, Neil. And our next area of focus is neglect, and that includes self-neglect. So we have split this in the kind of areas of focus into adults and children because they are slightly different. So you can see that for adults, it's raising the awareness of self-neglect. It's considering hoarding, substance misuse, informed decision-making and behaviours, and actually, what do we do, or what are we able to do for those who perhaps don't meet the current thresholds? Because again, on that edge of threshold work can be a real challenge, and what we want to make sure is that we don't have families, adults, children within a family and adult situation where the neglect is a challenge that sit just on the edge of not being able to access support and help. So that pathway is being reviewed. And then the impact of the response to complex chronic neglect, our parental substance misuse, and learning from summits and multi-agency audits, again, key areas of focus. Neil will go on to talk a little bit about our reviews later, so I won't say too much about that, but our multi-agency reviews and where we have specific learning reviews and safeguarding reviews that take place, they inform the work that comes back to Safeguarding Board. Actually, quite often we have to send those nationally, so they have to be reported up like we statutorily have to report here. Those reports are really important to ensure that we are looking across the country to see whether we are seeing a change in society and whether or not that informs practice as well as policy. So really important. Talking about understanding the impact of the work, so introducing greater impact measures in this particular area. Again, going back to basics and really looking at our resources and training. That promotion of, and it's probably a key theme that you can recant routinely, that safeguarding is everyone's business. So actually we want to make sure it really is everyone's business, and that professional curiosity is really strong and no one's uncomfortable using that professional curiosity. So you will hopefully begin to see a greater focus. You will start to see some events. It may be that we ask you to be our champions on our behalf within the chamber. Again, think about our multi-agency training as and what we can do even more and go even further. Thank you, Neil. So other areas of focus that we looked at, domestic abuse and older people. We've just last week shared this with the Tyne-Wear and Northumberland Safeguarding Partnership, and the team did a superb piece of work that is now, actually we've had North Yorkshire in touch, and the local authorities outside have said, could we understand what you've done in this particular work? So we have met with service users, so co-production, thinking about the barriers to reporting, highlighting and sharing the local safeguarding adult reviews and domestic homicide reviews, again, statutory reporting for us, but not having them hidden away, making sure that they are understood, living documents that we can talk about and work with professionals, as well as residents, members and our staff. Particular, again, dedicated training package, working focusing on domestic abuse and older people, considering our temporary safe accommodation, including bungalows, so that we are thinking about accommodation that's appropriate to our residents and service users who need to access the services. And then our interactive learning event for frontline practitioners was very well supported and very well received in November 24. When we look at the work around domestic abuse and young people, we can see there we've consulted the workforce, developed some trusted resources. We use Padlets an awful lot. They're really good, accessible ways of learning and understanding where we are. It's not the only way, so there are multiple ways, and our refresh of the NCC website should make it much cleaner and clearer for anyone to access those relationships. But actually, when you get these slides, you will see there's a link, so you can have a look at them, and I'm sure that we would all welcome any feedback that you have on these areas. We held a summit in October last year around our domestic abuse in young people. Specific training for our practitioners and teenage relationships, again, relating back to my reference earlier about that domestic abuse threshold question and potential review. We will consider that in a local area, but also that will not be for us to change, but we will certainly consider our practice as a result of that being raised. And then, again, I did reference the Tyne and Wear Northumberland Safeguarding Partnership, and you can see a link where we've done that presentation and shared the work. Next slide, please, Neil. And last one from me, and you will see when you have time to read that it is a very chunky report. There are additional areas that are provided updates within the report, and you've got 10 of them there. So we are thinking really carefully about how these all work together. Our Safer and Education group you hear about through other reports in this committee. So that's all of our schools. We have school representation as part of the Safer and Education. Our community safety programme, family help, our NEWST team, Northumberland Emotional Wellbeing Support Team. Again, you hear about those through other reports. Clearly, public health today is a joint meeting with our health and wellbeing colleagues, and so that the public health reports reference this work routinely. And it would be remiss of me not to mention children's homes, because that is again another area that is particular to us within children's services, but actually you will see the updates within the report that refer to that. Talked about training and evaluation, so I'll hand you back to Neil.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. Audrey touched on case reviews in a little bit the narrative that she's just given there. So the next slide just moves us into that territory. And I mean, everything we've talked about so far has been around trying to prevent serious instances happening, about lifting the skills and ability of staff and everybody who's involved in safeguarding and spotting things early. But we live in the real world and things can go wrong. And there is a statutory requirement on us to review that within certain sets of circumstances when it does go wrong. Within children's services, they are child safeguarding practices reviews. They basically need to happen at the point that the local authority knows or suspects that a child has been abused or neglected and the child dies or is seriously harmed. That's the criteria for the children's side. And on the adult side, it's not dissimilar. So again, it would be a serious case of abuse or a death. But on the adult side, there does need to be a concern that partnership agencies didn't work as effectively as they could have done to prevent that in order to trigger that review taking place. Additionally, although there is they are the mandatory situations in which we have to carry out a review if you meet that threshold, there can be discretionary reviews carried out as well, where we think it's in the best interests of the organisations to actually undertake a review, even though it didn't meet the threshold, and we do enact that from time to time. So the report does set out an update on all the reviews that have been undertaken during the last period. It sets out a summary of the findings from those reviews. They are, of course, anonymised within the report. It talks about how the learning's been implemented and how it's informed service development. We also have a look at national review, learning from national and other local reviews outside of Northumberland as well. And we'll take that learning into what we're trying to deliver. And basically, we're trying to use all the information and intelligence that we've got to reduce the chances of these things happening going forward, which I'm sure is fairly obvious. There is a slide here. Obviously, we share the slide pack with you so you can have a look at this through this more slowly, but with a summary of the themes that have come out across all the reviews over the last years. And we do get repeating themes, therefore it is important that we go back and we reinforce things with staff, we re-update the training, etc. So as an example in here, number 2 there, recording information is something that's come out of the reviews that we've had this year. Information seeking and sharing at 3. Professional curiosity comes up as well from time to time, item 8 in there. I mean, this is the honesty page of the things that haven't gone quite right and the things that we do need to work on and try and lift the level of performance from teams that are dealing with people and everybody who's involved in safeguarding issues, both in terms of spotting them and in terms of managing them. I mean, the outcomes often is training. It is often updated guidance and things like that, but not exclusively. I mean, as an example, in terms of the work we've been doing around self-neglect in adults this year, we've actually changed the way that we manage those cases when they come through off the back of experience. So previously, self-neglected adults will be managed through frontline social work teams. Any cases now, from a change that we made mid-year last year, also have to be scrutinised by the safeguarding team themselves, because we just at this stage don't have the confidence that we're picking up all the issues. We might well change that practice back when we embed the confidence to a greater degree and we feel that the training's more embedded, but at the minute we're putting secondary checks in. So we will change processes in adults and children's where appropriate, as well as just implement learning. And then just a couple of slides on looking forward of what we're hoping to do over the coming period, and this is what we're probably, Audrey and I, are particularly interested in comments on. So the first slide, really, these are the areas that Audrey's already mentioned earlier in the report, but that will continue to be embedded through the coming period. So the exploitation of children, harm outside the family or the home, strategic exploitation, they're going to be key themes in the coming period still, and we want to keep pushing that learning and making sure that we've got that well embedded. The trauma-informed practice and awareness, we're going to start to evaluate what we've been doing on that and see whether that's having an impact. And we are considering becoming a shame-informed partnership. There is greater and greater awareness nationally that shame can be a key barrier to engagement with services following a trauma, and we want to ensure we're encompassing all aspects of making sure that we can get people to come forward and present when they're in that sort of situation. And Audrey's mentioned the neglect and self-neglect there as well. Again, there'll be a continued push for that. In terms of moving into areas that are newer for the coming period, the working together guidance on safeguarding children obviously needs to be embedded fully. We have updated our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements for the statutory requirements that we need to put in there off the back of that government dictate, but we want that embedded in culture and in work and practice. We want to get better on data. You know, the way that we measure success is through data, and I know in kind of pre-meet Wayne mentioned that we possibly need more analytics in here, you know, kind of more graphical information. We're aware of that, and by getting better on the data around this, we'll be able to present that going forward. And then there's 4 areas there that are going to have particular focus in the coming period. So transitional safeguarding for adolescents moving through, particularly from the looked after children system into adulthood, and make sure we've got safeguarding wrapped around them as they start that process into adult life. Gender identity is a big issue nationally at the minute. We're going to have a close look at that over the coming period. The role of carers, including young carers, and homelessness and rough sleeping, which again is a particularly topical issue nationally, regionally, and here in Northumberland as well. There are a number of useful links towards the end of the presentation, which obviously you'll get, and you'll be able to just click on those to get to the various documents that Audrey and I have referenced as we've been talking throughout this presentation itself. And then there's a key contact on the back there. We've got Emma in the room here, who's the business manager for adults. Sarah Parker's the business manager for children's. And obviously Sam's the chair. And we probably should have had Sue Kirkley on there as well as the independent scrutineer on that list. So we might add that before we send the slides out as well. I mean, the closing remark from me, just that I think the key issue here is for people, and accept your point, Anna, you know, there may not be a lot of time to read the report, but please do have a read of the report, and any feedback is really appreciated, and particularly any comments on our areas of priority for the coming period as well would be really appreciated, and whether you think we've got that right and we're pitching at the right things there. And that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So in your papers, you'll see that what we're being asked to do is to note the report. It's written. We can't change it. It's written, and it's its second year as that joint children and adults. And the second thing is any comments, and particularly what Neil's alluded to there, which in your pack on the big, because I know there's double numbers, there's big numbers, so it's page 63 or 41 in the small numbers, about those looking forward, whether we feel those are the right areas to look at. But I did have a chat before the meeting today, and I think there's some incredible detail in here. But I think moving forward, as we look into further reports for next year, the use of infographics, that we have a jargon buster in there, would be really helpful. But I'm happy now to take any comments from members of the committee. So Councillor Watson and then Councillor Hill in that order, and I'll take any others as well.
Thanks, Chair. Just thank you for the report, and like I did say, it's got a lot of detail in there, and I will take some time to go through it in a bit more detail. obviously you touched on a lot of it revolves around staff and the training of staff. Have you got any kind of feedback from staff? Is there any information that's come back from staff about how they feel and how it's supported them with everything that's been done in this report?
I mean, the honest answer to that, Anna, is it's a constant flow and has been over a number of years. So, I mean, we get staff satisfaction through different ways. I don't think we have actually targeted specifically a satisfaction survey at the end of safeguarding training, but we absolutely could. You know, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. And I'll take that forward as a suggestion, to be honest. So,
there's definitely, we've done a lot of work around contextual safeguarding, because that is quite a difference, quite a change and a recognition. And actually, the informal feedback is staff feel much more prepared and understand. I think it's, you know, we should be able to do, and we've talked about saying we'll increase the impact measures. How do we know the training that we're providing is making the real difference? So Neil's right, you know, formalising that. I know, because actually people tell you, and you hear it not just in meetings, but you hear it in corridors, or you hear it in conversations, and you think, that's stuck, that's stuck. So there's some assurance around some of that, but I think it would be good to have some formal measures.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Just got 2-3 comments, stroke questions. First of all, sort of following on from Anna's point about, it is a detailed report, but about surveys, there's not too much in to test and challenge that sort of data on that, on the report. I mean, I think we know generally that this area of the council works very well. There's no room for complacency, because if one case slips through the net, it's obviously serious. There's no room for, but I know the service generally works pretty well, or very well. Just 2 further points. So I pretty much every week contact Audrey and or Neil about safeguarding issues, don't I? And I sometimes think, part of me thinks, is that right thing to do? Am I going too senior? You guys are too busy. But I kind of think also, I know to get things done, I need to contact you. So checking regarding point of contact for councillors, are we right? It seems that we're right to do that. And if we contact one of you or both of you, you're working with the others, you're working within that system. So it's just some commentary around our contact as councillors around safeguarding issues. And the final point is, I'm presuming, and just some assurance, that you do look for weaknesses within the system. So whether it's a school that has constant reports about not managing safeguarding well, or if it's, and you definitely can't presume too much in this, but I've had, you know, maybe somebody that works within the system whose name keeps coming up in complaints, for example. So if you could talk a little bit about identify where there is weaknesses in organisations or individuals who have an important role in safeguarding.
I'll take that one, Councillor Hill. Neil might want to come in something specific to adults, but in relation to members coming direct to myself, I don't have an issue. In terms of that, I mean, we always encourage everybody to make sure we follow the appropriate reporting routes. I'm always reassured that when I ask the team about it, they already know about it, so it's not a surprise to them. Sometimes the responses, you know, and I accept if as a parent or as a guardian or of a child, a carer of a child, sometimes the anxiety levels, because they haven't had a swift response, sometimes can escalate. However, it's really important, for all the reasons you said, that we gather the right information. We're able to put all of that together and be really clear, because it's more damaging to go off on the wrong direction and ensure we've got the full picture. So it's really important. So in terms of that assurance, you know, every single day, with, not that there are significant issues, but every day in some way, shape or form, I'm talking with colleagues, whether that's school, whether that's in our family hubs, whether it's social care, whether it's a join up with adults on occasions. You know, sometimes it's a family, a whole family. So, you know, Neil and I are engaged in this. Just because we're the directors or the ED sat at the top, we're not away from that. So some assurance around that. The second bit, I think, which was around, you know, how are our schools working, how are our partners working, etc. So we have an infrastructure within our, it actually sits within our virtual school, the safeguarding team, school safeguarding team, and they routinely offer support training and challenge to our schools. So I don't just get queries in from yourselves, I get them in through Ofsted, or I get them in through our regulatory DFE services in some way, shape or form, where an individual has gone through that. And so we have a process where we gather that information, we keep that information. We know if we have particular hotspots. So if I have, let's say I have 4 queries come in and it's for one school, I then go back and I look at it and I say, okay, quite often it's the same query that's come in 4 different routes. So that's very different to having 4 different queries that come in. If it's about the same issue, just coming in through, I'm going to say an MP, a member, a direct one to me, and then perhaps through Ofsted or another organisation, that's very different. So we try and collate those together to make sure that the same information is going back. But we focus very much on areas that we do have concerns. The team do regular safeguarding training, particularly for schools. They sign up to SLAs. Just this week, our new head teachers have had part of their induction pack who've joined us in January this year, and the teams are all part of that process. So anybody coming new into Northumberland know where to access the help, the advice, the guidance, know who the particular contact is, if they have somebody they need to go to immediately for advice, and are completely aware of the appropriate escalation and reporting routes.
Can I just ask a very quick point of clarification? So I'm not going to give a named example, I'm not going to give an example. So if, for example, you have, and I've had this a bit, I'm taking my child out of the school because they're being badly bullied, physically attacked, and the school's not looking after them enough. They're not progressing with a complaint or anything, but would you note that, if you like, so if that pattern keeps coming up, it starts alarm, but yeah,
we do.
Fine.
So I have we have a list that we keep of the complaints that come in and where it's the schools, and then we collate them together, so we have a dynamic record of what that looks like, and we routinely look at those. The Safer and Education group picks up on some of the key themes, but actually Vicky in particular with the team will look at that in our virtual schoolwork, and the team look at that routinely.
I think Neil wanted to quickly dive in there as well.
Actually, I should also say, just to finish, apologies, Neil.
Don't worry, Audrey.
It is really key that we, if you look at all of our inspection reports, we don't have any schools, all of their reports, and it is the only sentence that can be said, safeguarding is effective. It can be either effective or not effective, no further comment, and all of our schools are safeguarding is effective.
Yeah, and it was just to add a bit of context from adults as well. Yes, the sonar is going all the time around looking for hotspots, so that might be establishments, it could be a single care home or something like that. Organisational safeguarding is something that we regularly get into. Additionally, internally, if we think we've got hotspots and we're not spotting things we should be spotting, we'll target staff groups and things like that. And just one example I was going to give, post-COVID, we had a spate in quite close succession of a number of deaths of elderly gentlemen who'd lost their wives in COVID and had slipped into self-neglect. And that was one of the triggers. None of them actually met the threshold for an individual SAR, but it was one of the triggers for a start in the thematic review around self-neglect going forward. It wasn't the only trigger, but it was one part of it. So we're constantly scanning and sharing that information from our side. And I think you asked about point of contact as well, Georgina. I mean, I can't speak for Audrey, but for me, generally members are very sensible in terms of how they use me as a conduit to get things done. So I have no problem with things coming directly. The MP's inquiries come directly to us as well. I mean, inevitably, we will pass them out into the team to get them moved on. But yes, absolutely, you can use me. I can see Audrey Norton as a point of contact, for any safeguarding issues that you wanted to raise.
Thank you for that clarity. Right, I have 3 speakers, and then I'm keen to move progress. Right, so, but let me just tell you what they are in order. So I've got Councillor Bowman, Councillor Swinburne, and then Suzanne. Trevor, did you have a question as well? Yeah, I'll add you to this, and then I'll move progress at the end of that. So those are the 4 speakers in order. So Councillor Bowman, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's a comment. The last 6 years, I've seen a massive change, not just in attitude, but on the ground as well. And I'm talking about multi-agency. And I believe that multi-agency attitude change has happened here. You've actually guided that change. You've actually fed out into all agencies, wherever we live, who interact with our children. And it's not just schools, it can be the youth service, it can be all sorts of different aspects, social workers and so on. There has been a dynamic change, and I believe it's because you've driven this policy and you've driven it for the right reasons, and it's actually having a difference in our communities. So if I think about antisocial behaviour, it's devastating in a community, but when the police interact in that antisocial behaviour, they can actually come back and give reports about other aspects of a child's life, which I think is absolutely amazing. And I just want to sing your praises for that. There's only one comment I would like to say. It was sad that Northumberland County Council decided to get rid of the youth service, and that was a sad day. But we can move on from that. I'm sure that the communities will pick up from that, and the voluntary sector will move in. And it is vital that we interact with our young people in our community. Well, thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Your points, positive, I'm sure will be passed on to the staff. I want to bring Audrey in on your second point.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for that, Councillor Bowman, and we'll definitely feed that back to the staff. And actually, I was really heartened at full council last night to have that, to hear the discussion. I wasn't part of it, but to hear the discussion about the use of DBS for elected members, and that is a further step. You will hear as a committee in the coming weeks and months, and in fact, we will have a policy conference around our very different approach to asking all members to be really strong corporate parents for our children in Northumberland. But I'll pick up on that one. I just wanted to just reference and remind the committee that it is a change of language from youth service to our services that support young people. And so I think that's really key to just remind everyone that there is some change. There was change at the time, but there is still a set of services that meet the needs of young people in Northumberland. We do use the community and voluntary sector, but there are still place-based services within our teams, within children's services. Thank you.
Just setting the record straight on that one. So next we'll have Councillor Swinburne, Suzanne, and then Trevor Thorne, and then we'll draw an end to this and move on. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Audrey, I'm pleased you just mentioned about corporate parents then. I want to focus on this extensive report, but on specifically the children's safeguarding side. So, as members, we are corporate parents. We have a legal responsibility and a duty of care. And it's been mentioned about safeguarding training, and I'm not sure how far through our authority that goes. It would be remiss of me not to raise this at a scrutiny committee. But as we've discussed, we do have a fly in the ointment when it comes to safeguarding our children in Northumberland, and that comes down to our planning system. That works against us. We know we've got a programme where for a long time now we've spent a ridiculous amount of money for our children in care going outside of Northumberland, right across the country, and escalating costs, and outside, away from people's families, etc., etc., and we're working on bringing them back into the area. To do that, and to move them back into the area and put them into an individual setting, we have to go through the planning system. That planning system is public, it's in the public domain, and because of that, it highlights the individual property where one child will be placed. Because it goes through the planning system, it affects the individuals who live around there. We have a communication issue to address because the message isn't getting out there properly. And through the planning system, as we've seen in a planning committee, and sadly, you know, one of our corporate parents, one of our members, approached this not in a positive manner, stirred up a lot of local tensions, and we had a planning committee where it was massively affected in a negative way, to the point where it was reported in the press, and to put it bluntly, that property is targeted. That's not a good safeguarding method. There's others in the pipeline in the same way. So from a safeguarding perspective, our planning system works against us to protect our children in care as individuals. We're trying to do the right thing. You know, in the majority of cases, it's not their fault that they're in care. You know, we're trying to protect them as corporate parents. It conflicts us, but, you know, does the planning system have safeguarding training? Is there anything we can do there? Because we're doing the best that we can through the multi-agency, through all the fantastic work that we're doing, but we're basically just holding them up saying, whoa, look at this, here's a house with an individual child here, and we're flagging it up for all to see, and it's just not right, it's not working, and something has to change. And as I say, I think it's remiss of me not to raise this.
I'm going to ask Audrey to quickly pick up on that one, because that's a planning is quasi-judicial, but I'll let Audrey pick up on that.
Thank you, Chair. So two aspects, Councillor Swinburne. First of all, safeguarding training. Every member of staff has a mandatory safeguarding training module that they complete. And I also believe that's also available for all members to complete as well. So that is part of our routine, and it is much more than that, as I explained earlier. This is about the culture of an organisation, having an approach to safeguarding, that it's everybody's extended business to understand the risk, etc., all of the time. So that's the first bit. The second bit, I do know what you're talking about. I read all of the press and heard all of the detail afterwards. Sadly, we have a perception and stigma around our children's homes. I have had the privilege very recently to visit the greater majority, still some to go, of our children's homes. And there is a view and perception that they are something that's like a beacon that shines in a street, and that actually they're just like every other house in the street, and the children who live there are like every other child that live in many homes in that street. I acknowledge that we currently haven't got it right around that, working with our planning and children's services, not for the want of trying. So the team tried a different approach just in the last round, and that still hasn't worked. So Vicky and I have committed to work with members in locality ahead of anything going anywhere, and with planning, because it has to be a joint service process. The last thing I want are children or any of our officers, colleagues, staff, team members put in a vulnerable position, identified. And actually the bigger piece of work is to help everybody understand, and this is back to my corporate parenting discussion that I mentioned earlier in our policy conference, it is the importance of members championing where we need to safeguard our children across the whole of Northumberland and you know, across the whole country actually, but actually our statutory responsibility lies within the borders of Northumberland, and it's really important that we help the public to understand what it really is and what it's absolutely not.
Thank you. So there's an action which will come out with that, Mark. So last two, if we can try to move progress, please. I've got Suzanne and then Trevor. Suzanne.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'm hugely reassured by this report. I think it's got a huge scope, and it's clearly an evolving scope as well in regards to new issues that arise, which is really, I think, well, highly reassuring. I'm especially so by the mention of Holly Newton's parents, who've been doing sort of championing work in our community after that incident sent shockwaves really through my ward and beyond. The issue of domestic abuse and coercive control is one that maybe wasn't considered really much in relation to children, and now she's brought it very much into the press. And it is a huge issue of concern. and I think it is on the rise. Hence, and I think this thing will go through where the age is lowered to 16, and I think that's a very good thing. With that in mind, will those figures be kept separate and come back here for maybe a more nuanced review of how in the facts committee itself, rather than as lumped in with all adult domestic abuse? So that's my first question. And also in regards to getting the message out there, certainly what the Truslers have been doing and going into the schools is, and doing their presentation on both knife crime and this key issue of relationships between young adults, especially. When it came into our local high school, the kids really listened. It was absolutely powerful. They came home and they talked about it. They talked about the documentary on TV as well. And I think it meant so much more than it coming through the usual PSHE streams and teachers talking about it. It actually was incredibly powerful coming from their mouths. And I'm hoping that that could be supported and maybe rolled out more across the region, because that was a brilliant presentation from what I heard. So just for your support for that, please.
Thank you for that. So two aspects, I think, to respond to there. That developing the impact measures and what that looks like. When you see later reports, you'll see that the reports do have much more infographic information, and it shows you numbers and impact and percentages. We'd like to be able to do that and develop this into the report so that you can see some more instant stats rather than necessarily read as much words as you currently do. We will certainly take that away, and obviously it's a developing consideration and theme at the moment, but I'll certainly take that away, and Neil and I will link that in with the executive, which we meet I think on Wednesday next week. Certainly from the knife crime and the kind of police development training that's available for schools. Again, just at the Tyne and Wear and Northumberland Safeguarding Partnership, we had a long discussion about the protocol that's being developed by police that's linked in with schools and how that's working. Tomorrow, I meet with one of our, or the Northumbria Sergeant who leads on that, around how we do that more broadly, not just the voice in schools, but how we link across that regionally with some inclusion work. And so some of our more vulnerable children who perhaps are subject to suspension or exclusion from school can often drift into those more vulnerable areas and are at a greater risk of exploitation. So we are joining up the safeguarding work with that and making sure that we've got clear voices. It's no good hearing it from me. They need to hear it from young people, peers. Much more important. Yes, I have the statutory responsibility and Neil has that, but actually my voice is about the reporting of it and the making it happen and the challenge. It is really important for young people to hear that in an appropriate situation with an appropriate voice, and then it just does resonate so much more. So that will be a core theme to how we get those messages across in terms of our training and development going forward.
And that's an imminent conversation with the teams. I mean, could you also mention the possibility of a knife amnesty as well, which are quite powerful when done properly in conjunction with schools and the local community? That would be something I would really support.
I will take that into the conversation and report back to you.
Thank you. Trevor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just want to say, great report. Safeguarding is, well, it's so important. And I think in this report, we're covering all areas, teams of people working together, very, very good. But my question really is about just outside school and safeguarding with regard to the transportation of children to school and back home again, where NCC is the provider. And yes, I'm looking at a specific case. I'm looking at the transportation of, my children from Long Framlington to Swarland. And I know in time gone by, there was actually a person, a host, on the bus to look after the children. I don't think that happens anymore. But all I'm asking is, you know, are we really up to the mark on making sure that our children's journey to school is a good one and is a safe one? Because, you know, you want to get them to school in one piece where they're just ready to learn and they feel safe and comfortable. And yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So all of our home to school transport contracts are built into that. Every member of staff undertakes safeguarding training, and the home to school transport team, it doesn't sit in children's, sits in our integrated transport team, but they carry out audits throughout the year. So on the spot, unannounced audits. They are checking routinely if they have. I guess it's similar to our conversation earlier around schools from Councillor Hill. If there are a number of spikes in issues that come through a particular route, then they will do some unannounced monitoring. They will do some checks. They will do some focused areas. And the team do that routinely. It's part of their annual cycle of how they operate. But anybody who comes in as a new contract, every member of staff, every escort undertakes enhanced DBS checks and has to carry out safeguarding. We have a safeguarding trainer within the home to school transport team who work very closely with the school safeguarding team, and they undertake the training.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've noted the report, we've commented on it, so thank you very much to Neil and Audrey for presenting that. We now move on to item number 5, which is the Northumberland Skills Annual Self-Assessment Report in your agenda pack. It's pages 71 to 96. It's going to be taken by Mick Burton. It's Mick's first time, so be gentle with him, please. Mick, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and present the report. I'd pretty much like to start with a little bit of context around Northumberland Skills. We are the post-16 adult service for Northumberland County Council. We operate a values-based educational model and hopefully fill in the gaps that other providers may not be able to support. Northumberland Skills, certainly since COVID, is a transformed service, and our main focus is on achievement, destination and progression of both young people and adults, all our residents actually across the county. We have a couple of external scrutinies within Skills. We are Ofsted inspected, same as a school or another post-16 provider, college. We also are Matrix accredited. That's a standard that's there to measure the level of information, advice and guidance that we give to adults. And since COVID was a bit of a milestone for a lot of post-16, certainly adult provision. Recruitment has increased, participation has increased of learner numbers year on year, and our delivery locations reflect the place-based need. There's a slide there which identifies the 9 locations that we currently operate from as a service. Hopefully trying to capture some of the hotspots across the county. Obviously there is quite a consideration and density around the Port of Blythe. There's a lot of activity going on in the Port of Blythe. We have a couple of sites there from a welding and fabrication centre, and also we are part of the Energy Central Learning Hub from September gone there. Just to try and outline some of the growth, I'm not sure how easy it is to see from a numbers perspective, but you can see the line, the trajectory is heading in the right way. The 2 graphs that's on there, the first one on the left-hand side is a 16 to 18 growth of learner numbers, and looking at 2021-22, we had 41 young people with us, and we're now with 183 as it stands from September. From an adult perspective, the 2021 area was 805 participations up to now 23-24, which was up till September gone there, we had 1,933 participations. The adult landscape has been a big challenge. We are not the only provider that's encountered that. Participation from adults was really difficult after COVID, probably not undue to the fact that a lot of adults kind of found something else to do other than evening learning, leisure learning. But we have made considerable progress as a service, and so have other post-16 providers as well. I have to say the direction of engagement is very positive. As a service, we also have an offer for SEND. We would like to think we complement this alongside other providers. You can see the sort of growth that we have experienced in SEND learners. Our main delivery site is Lindisfarne Centre at Alnwick, but we also have some satellite provision out in the west at Prudhoe in the Fuse Media Centre. But certainly, if you look at the numbers from 22-23, we had 11 young people with us to the numbers we stand now with 68 young people. As I say, complementing other providers that's in the county as well. Just some of the performance outcomes that sit within Northumberland Skills. Actually, we're very focused on achievement rates, the key determinants that sit within further education, retention, pass rate achievement, all words that sit not just within the school but within any post-16 environment as well. We obviously are compared against national rates and measured on attendance, progress, and in the main progression to higher levels and destinations. The focus for us as a service will always be about progression, and hopefully that progression and destination is to some form of employment. Just some headline pictorial, a new word that I've learned quite recently, infographics, actually, an infographic that hopefully shows the direction of travel for our 16, 18, 19 plus, which is adults, and all ages combined together as a service. And the overall service achievement, as I've stated on that slide, is 4.6% above national rate. A little bit of slide, a little bit around our SEND audience and some of the achievement and retention rates that we've managed over last year. Is coming up to, obviously we have a new cohort started in September, and obviously as always we're looking to even better them figures, providing some, hopefully some really good positive opportunities for our SEND young people. Not forgetting apprenticeships. We do hold an apprenticeship contract. You can see the direction of travel since 2021 is also positive, and while 69.4% may not look a particularly attractive number, it is 10% above any DFE intervention milestone across the whole of the apprenticeship landscape in England. As I said earlier, destinations is what our service is about. There's some headline information there from some learner survey type activity that's took place, with some pretty positive feedback actually, and destinations of some of our young people in the success story bit there, which hopefully will allow them to, certainly young people anyway, and adults, but allow them to progress in life and make some positive contribution towards, well, not just themselves, but also to the county, actually. The last couple of slides, I've just included some feedback. As I said earlier, we had a recent matrix assessment report, which was completely independent, and matrix assessor interviewed both employers, partners, and learners, recipients is the language that was used in their report. And these are some of the comments that they received for the report from some of the partner employers and young people and adults that they interviewed during the course of that inspection. And one more slide with a little bit more information. So all in all, we're hoping we are playing a really active part. Whilst there is a college in the county at Ashington and a send-off at Kirtley Hall, we hope we are playing a really good part under a local authority banner to help move education post-16 forward across Northumberland. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. So Mick undersells himself. The transform word here is significant. You will see in the report that they are very honest and lay out their strengths and also areas for improvement. You will also see that they talk about the knowledge, skills and behaviours, and it's no coincidence that that's exactly what is helping the learners, whether they are young people, aged 16 to 18, or whether they are adults, move into employment. We have, if you watch social media, that new intervention work at Blythe around the advanced manufacturing. At the end of every module, there are employers who are standing there and handing out the certificates, so they are getting to know the students well ahead of any interviews that they may apply for, so they know the calibre of individuals. It is a values-based service, and it is really important that we as a local authority, we've already talked about corporate parenting and our responsibilities, that we think really carefully how we work with our residents who might be a little bit further from moving into further education, higher education or employment. And we work with them, and the service is transformed with a significant pastoral support network within it to be able to ensure those young people are not left behind. So that inequality and closing the gap is very much a focus of this service. We do expect Ofsted at any point, and you've seen some key stats there. I know Reverend Lennox is always interested in the English and Maths performance rate, so I'm sure we'll be pleased to see those within the self-assessment report. But this comes to you annually to give you that update. And if I think back to the very first one that I presented in 2019, I think when I'd only been here a few weeks and came in to present that. It is a very different service that you see today, but a very successful one. So I just wanted to perhaps say a little more about the work that Mick and the team have done that he's a little shy to say.
So Mick, that wasn't that bad, was it? Oh, well done. Right, questions. So Georgina, oh, I've got them in a row here. It's dead easy for me. Right, so Georgina, Suzanne, and then Angie. So far.
Thank you. Obviously, there's lots of positive things that come from the report. The attendance and attainment and above national average, and all appropriate systems seem to be in place. The only thing that I just want to sort of pick up on, and to be honest, if you any organisation, particularly in the public sector, there's room for improvement in communication and linked with that advertising. One thing, to make a general point, careers advice generally is dire across the country, and letting people know and really promoting the opportunities that particularly sort of vocational education and apprenticeships. And I've seen young people who struggled at school. I was going to say they're not academic, maybe the school's so bad it doesn't bring out their academic, and then just being transformed, and the parents just can't believe what benefit apprenticeship and then sort of earning and doing something more sort of practical. So tell me about your strategy for sort of advertising, promoting the service and vocational education and post-16 and apprenticeships.
Thanks. Yeah, we now have we have the last 2.5 years, 3 years, I think we have a website presence now, and we are, Northumberland Skills is on social media. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, so we take advantage, and a LinkedIn page, so we take advantage of as many of the social media opportunities we can to promote. We do host various, under the umbrella of NCC, we do host some information, advice and guidance events across the county in different locations. Last year we hosted 4, which we were present at. This year we intend to host another 4, commencing in March. And there's a one at County Hall planned for Lindisfarne and Alnwick. Berwick Academy's hosting one of them, and I think the Queen Elizabeth in Hexham, I think. And that is not just about us as a provider being there, that's about us attracting a network of employers and providers that potentially have jobs that can tell the story about what opportunities there are for both young people and adults across the county. We do link up with Northumberland College as well. Hopefully we complement what they have to offer, and are always in discussion around what the best way to get the messages across, certainly into schools and towards a young people audience. But we are not the only provider across Northumberland.
Yeah, I think all schools have a responsibility around careers, information, advice and guidance. You know, it's now inspected in terms of the framework. There are hundreds of private training providers that operate within Northumberland, and so I don't think it could be eradicated that there are lots of mixed messages or understanding at different level. What certainly we try to do as a, I'm going to say as a trusted provider, if you like, is try and keep everything exactly as it should be. You know, Mick shared some of the matrix comments, and so that matrix accreditation is around the assurance of appropriate advice, careers information, advice and guidance. So it's really important to make sure students understand the course that they are applying for, that they're placed on the wrong course, and not just taken onto a course because actually that helps the providers learn their numbers. It is hugely important that the right student is on the right course for the right reasons, because then they'll succeed, they'll progress well, their confidence and their well-being will improve as a result of that, and actually their ambition changes so that they begin to think, I can do this. And we see that. So we do have a number of children who've been known to us in children's services actually, or have been known to us through some of our monitoring, through attendance or non-attendance, exclusions, and they've gone on to do courses within Northumberland Skills. They now have jobs. They are now working full-time in apprenticeships with jobs. There are lots of misnomers that apprenticeships offer for children, young people who've perhaps failed. That's wrong. Apprenticeships have significantly high thresholds for everybody to be able to access. Part of our job in the transformation of the service and working jointly with Northumberland College is what precedes that to be able to help our young people to get onto those courses so that they can succeed when they get there. So I'll talk just quickly about Northumberland Skills, but if you think about pre-apprenticeship programmes, our core learning programmes that are full-time learning programmes really prepare young people well to go on to tailored training programmes that might be appropriate for industry. For our young people with special educational needs and disabilities, we now have an internship programme, and again, really important, another step, another direction. So it's helping them to be prepared, getting them into employment and sustained employment. So it's not employment for 4 weeks to tick a box, it's about sustained employment. And you would notice some of the stats in the report talk about, and it's an independent company who do that checking. So it's not Mick on the phone or his team on the phone. It is a company that we bring in who do that independent check, and it gives the assurance both to the team that it's right and otherwise. And those sorts of comments that you see in the report will form part of, if you like, the recruitment and marketing strategy. It's important that the information is accurate and it's valid.
Quickly on that, just on the engagement point, I know it's, there's resources, implications for this, but you just do feel that sometimes, and everyone can do the engagement, it's, the website, it's a drop-in centre and giving out this information, become a hairdresser, become a whatever. I think there's room for more imaginative engagement. And you're right, the schools in this environment to have that engagement, have a discussion about what apprenticeship mean and what alternative routes are and so on. And the schools have a key part. And to be honest, even good schools generally probably, there's a big room for improvement in that engagement. But we should look at more imaginative rather than just the obvious easy websites, stands and so on.
Yeah, we do lots of that. You might want to talk about your school liaison and your school engagement work. So significant amount of work goes on. We introduced these 4 events around the county. So in other authorities where we have some experience, there's one annual event that young people are all invited to. We decided to have 4 so that we've got them place-based, if you like. So it's much more accessible in Northumberland. But it's really important that that's only going to be for Northumberland Skills. It's about maximising the accessibility to all employers and all industries. So, for example, in the West, EGA and Essity are always saying, actually, we don't get enough apprentice applications. So it's really important that they have a presence at the events and that we connect the schools with each of those companies and the school liaison, so that we're able to make sure they've got a better chance. It's not perfect, and we're always looking at doing things. But you might want to say a little bit, Mick, about engagement.
Thanks, Audrey. Yeah, just from September, this academic year that we're in now, we've been able to manage to put in post a school liaison officer. That person's dedicated job now is to not only attend all events that happen across the county, but also to pretty much penetrate and make relationships with heads of year, leaders that's within schools, and not just high schools, secondary schools. That there is a job to do, I think, earlier than that, even at primary, regarding careers advice and what the opportunities may be going forward. And we are fortunate to have a school liaison officer that their full-time job is to do that across the county, as well as liaise with Northumberland College's school liaison service as well, to make sure the right messages are getting out there. And I appreciate Councillor Hill. It is a challenging landscape actually within schools. But I think as long as we are trying to continue to do what we are doing, and we hope to grow that as well, and in an ideal world I would like more than one school liaison officer across the service.
Just to add to some of Mick's points there, almost all young people who leave our, mainstream education system and our special schools do go on to a destination which is suitable for them. We don't have a huge number of young people sort of loose or not contained within the next steps for their education training. It could be an internship or a supported internship. And actually Mick's service in particular, I think, has played a key role in that reduction in the figures and to ensure that there is a destination for all. So, for instance, Mick will pick up a lot of his custom, or he has a proportion of his custom that will come to him post GCSE results day, when maybe maths and English isn't in the bag where it would have wished to have been, and therefore that's a lot of Mick's clientele. And not only is that possibly learners that other providers might, they're desperate to pick up all the 5 GCSEs, including maths and English that I had, they get snapped up sort of straight away, as it were. In the private sector, but mixed teams step in for those that maybe might not have got to that point to get them back on track appropriately. And I'm aware of a huge number of young people for whom that has been transformational, that they haven't got to a position where maybe in the past they would have disappeared down a different track which wasn't into further education, employment or training, but they actually have had that opportunity to do so. I think, Georgina, just like you mentioned before, possibly some of those guys that weren't as motivated at school suddenly become hugely motivated, being able to access maybe a different curriculum which is more suited to their needs and learning pathways.
Okay, so I think you've had your point answered there quite comprehensively. To move progress, we've got Suzanne, and then we've got Angie, and then we'll move on. So, Suzanne.
Right, I promise I'll be quick because actually I was pipped to the post there by my fellow councillor on what I was going to ask. But it was actually just to say thank you. I thought this is a really exciting report. Your passion for this clearly shows through, and I'm a big believer in multiple pathways. Anyway, post 16, you know, the one size fits all that we've seen maybe in recent decades is imperfect. And your promotion of it aside, with the liaison officers and going into schools and that aside, why do you think the growth is fantastic? Why do you think that is? Do you think that there are gaps in that further education is becoming too narrow and academised, or do you think that the commodification of higher education is maybe, you know, pushing people into other areas that are just as viable?
I think, and this is some data Audrey gave me some time ago actually, I think some of it is as a result of possibly 3-4 years ago, there was a significant number of young people especially who just left Northumberland altogether to go for education, whether that would be Newcastle College or Tynemouth or wherever. And I certainly think the growth is not, well, I think it's certainly attributed to us as a service being much more visible through our social media and website, and potentially the offer we have for certainly some of the both young people and adults that certainly David alluded to before, may well be more appropriate. I'll not say better, but more appropriate for some of our young people, especially in Northumberland, where they've made a decision with their feet, ultimately, to not make that journey out of the county and to stay within the county. And certainly there appears to be more than sufficient market share within the county for ourselves as a training provider. We're not a college, but we behave like a college, and the college to survive within the county and still provide quality education outcomes.
Definitely. I think you clearly complement the mainstream offering really well. I think that's a true testament to the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Angie.
Thank you, Mick, for your report. And I would just like to apologise for my question yesterday at full council, where I actually meant the adult offer from the Fuse in Prudhoe, which I think has gone, you know, back when a few years ago I did my maths and English at the Fuse in Prudhoe, and I know that isn't offered now. But I would just like to say that maybe the Fuse isn't the right place for adult education, and maybe we could look at somewhere else in the Prudhoe area for that, or maybe get the job centre up there and direct people, adults, to, you know, to look at the Fuse and look at how fabulous the building is, because it is. But I think it puts people off going up that big hill. And you know, is there something else coming for adults to the Prudhoe area?
Need cable cars.
Yeah.
That could be your election strategy. Go for a cable car.
So,
Mick, is there anything to add to that?
Well, certainly the utilisation of the Fuse is something that's constantly on our mind as a service. We are currently, as you may or may not be aware, the upstairs part of the fuse we lease out to Collingwood School for their sixth form SEND offer is up there. Downstairs we have our own SEND offer, and there are some leisure-based courses that occur within there. Despite many different attempts to market ourselves, certainly from an adult perspective, and including English and maths, we are really struggling to get any traction with participation. Whether that's attributed to the fact that there's a big massive hill to climb up to get to the fuse or not, I don't know. But we're certainly open to any considerations and new ideas that anybody has going forward.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I would just say that there's quite a significant track record in terms of the service being very dynamic and flexible. So looking for need or identifying need, recognising need from residents of all ages, and then responding as swiftly as possible. So making the team are the sorts of guys who do, and there is a significant track record of this, of going, there's a need here, and 3 weeks later we've opened a setting and we're getting people in through the doors. That's also reflective in terms of 18 months ago we had a post-16 SEND provider who had some building issues with what they were going to deliver, and we literally had 2 weeks before what would have been the start of September with 15 young people with significant needs who needed a provision that was appropriate and mixed service met individually with each family, and the majority of, not all, because it wasn't the right pathway for them, but spoke through and therefore delivered and extended a programme immediately to meet the needs of those young people and their families. And therefore there's a track record of that. Wherever there is demand, Mix will investigate that, and where possible will expand, grow, and we'll see those charts continue to head in that direction. If anybody wants to come and see some skills facilities in use, open invitation to all committee members to come and see either on your local patch or further afield if you want to do that, in case you see something further afield you think, why can't we not have that on my local patch? So that's just open. Contact Nick directly if you're interested.
Go on, Councillor Watson.
Mine's just really quick, and to follow on from David Street, I would absolutely love to come and see the Blythe Hub at where you're in, and just I'm really reassured, because listening to you reassures me that Blythe Central Hub is open to everybody in the county. And I guess once we've got the train line fully operational in Blythe, it'll make it more accessible for more people to come there. So, and I just really wanted to give you some feedback, because some of my fellow councillors, both at Town Council and at County, have been to visit the Northumberland Skills, and they were absolutely impressed beyond belief. They said it was an amazing place to go to, and to see these young people really take pride in the fact that they were in this building and they treated it like a workplace, and they have the day is set up like a work environment, and to really give them those skills and to provide them with that experience to go on into the workplace. So just a really big thank you from us, and very proud to have it in Blythe, but it's great to hear that it's open to everybody in the county, so thank you.
Thank you, and very humbling. Thank you.
Good. Les, is it really mission critical? Quick, come on.
Just before Christmas, I visit the new Astley and Wheatrick Middle and High School at Seaton Delaval. And I was absolutely amazed of how many construction workers were there getting on and building a fantastic building. And I was thinking to myself, if our children locally got involved into the construction industry in that level, it would be absolutely amazing. These are fantastic jobs. And this is the key to it, isn't it? This is the gateway for our children to move into that construction industry. And not only that, it's a job for life, really, because you're going to always be building massive projects like this. And then recently we've just had the rail line open up, and that was another massive project with thousands working on it. And the part of that project, by the way, is to have children, youth move from Seaton Delaval to Newcastle to go to college. That was how it was sold. And I'm thinking, no. It should be the other way around. We keep them in Northumberland. So what I'm seeing here is a positive thing. We keep our children local, and we keep our children in Northumberland so that they stay in Northumberland. And I know from experience that my daughter went to university at Sheffield. She never come back. So, you know, we don't want to lose our children, do we? We want them to stay in Northumberland and stay with their families. But thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Les. Quickly, Audrey.
Very quickly. Thank you, Councillor Bowman, because you've just endorsed our key priority, which is meeting needs much closer to home. So we would hope that the train brings people into Northumberland to our training. Thank you.
Very good. Right. Agenda. We've had, I think, quite a detailed conversation there, so we've put our comments and noted the report. So thank you very much for that, Mick. We now move on to agenda item number 6, which is the Education, Send and Skills Annual Report, which, David, you are taking. It's 97 to 120 in your agenda packs.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to be able to bring this annual report to this committee. The annual report is an overview of service delivery and impact from Education, Send and Skills for the academic year 23 to 24. You'll see the overview of the way it's laid out is there were 6 key priorities which the service have been working towards over the last 2 years, and therefore the report is split up to progress and impact against those 6 priorities. As it happens, you do receive, and you just have received, more in-depth detail on each of the 6 priorities in the usual reporting process. A number of them are on the agenda today. So you'll note that key priority 4 is ultimately about Northumberland skills. There are some other elements to it. You've just received a report about progress in Northumberland skills. What you're looking at here is an overview for that section. You're about to hear some plans for school organisation, for SEND capacity and place planning. That will be key priority 5 is continued within there. So you're about to hear more detail there. At our last meeting, I think we had the annual report for school improvement. That would be looking at the key priorities 1 and 2 listed here. And we also have programmed in and regular updates across all areas of the service, actually, from a SEND perspective, and that will be key priority 3. So I'm not going to go through them necessarily individually. I am keen to get feedback and questions and so on, and areas for improvement going forwards. The report is trying to, again, be that high-level summary, but one which is transparent, both of the successes and also some of the challenges that remain. And I'll just have a last comment on the audience, sort of the purpose for the report. Certainly for yourselves, for members, there is a high degree of this report which is actually written with the view of keeping the Directorate staffing body up to speed. They may well be involved in and are and will recognise their place within the 6 key priorities, but also this helps them to knit together how their significant impact in their area knocks onto the other key priorities as well. So it's great to pull it together, and also great for me to deliver it to different audiences, so that I'm aware of and that they're aware of the contribution that they're making. So Directorate staff is a key focus of this. School leaders, this is presented at school leadership events across the year, and I know head teaching and leadership teams are encouraged to discuss that further with their governing bodies, and also across their staffing bodies. So you will find that this report sits on staff room, notice boards, etc., and will be I had not a direct comment actually, but a third-party comment the other day from a head teacher at one of our large high schools who says they actually roll it out all the time. So they were really pleased to receive it just recently at their head teacher's briefing in order to then be able to pass it on. And it's also shared with governors at the governors' chairs and vice chairs briefings, again to try and give that overview of how the service is delivering, and also to get feedback on what the service needs to do to adjust, adapt, to meet changing priorities over time. And then you'll see the last page actually is that lean towards the future, and that there's a slightly different way of organising the priorities on the last page. That was influenced by the Education Strategy Board, who, the sector-led board that have an influential part in the decision-making around the priorities, but you can clearly see there on the last page the areas of action and our core statutory responsibilities listed. Happy to take comments to help improve it further.
So thank you for that, David. I think just if I can just say that I think the report's presented really well. It was at Cabinet in December, so we're obviously just asked to note some observations on it. I think the report, the infographics in it are good, and I think the summary is good. And I think you've raised an interesting point for me, is about, well, so what? Where does this go? Who has it? And who has it in their army? So I'm satisfied with what you've said. There goes to school leaders, governing bodies. That I know it sits on some coffee tables in schools as well, doesn't it?
It's on the website as well, and actually it becomes quite a neat historical record, actually, because if you do go onto the Northumberland website and find this, you'll find last year's report, the year before that report, there's 6 of reports or so on there. And actually, when I gave the briefing to chairs of governors, one of the governors said, well, I'd seen it on the agenda, so I looked it up on the website in particular, and then it was really interesting reading the historical pathways, and they did hint at improvements over time, actually, so that was good. But some of the recurring themes as well means that historically we can obviously refocus resources towards, there are some continuing challenges, not just a change in landscape, but stuff that reoccurs, and we do definitely need to get to grips with the stuff that reoccur.
And before I bring members in, I think it goes back to that point earlier on, who's responsible for safeguarding? We all are. Who's responsible for making this happening? Every single member of our support staff, whether it's, you know, the dinner staff, the teaching support, school leaders. So I think it's important that it is available for people to see the role that they've played in the improvements in this county. So Mark Swinburne, had you indicated? I don't know if anyone else. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for this report, David. Just going to pick up a few things, and I've got some questions. So the academic outcomes shows on here we've come a long way from where we were a few years ago, thankfully, because there's been some significant improvements, and those were necessary. The early years provision even shows that we've got people coming from outside of our authority to use our provision. You know, we've got 106% there. And when I saw that, I thought, how can we have that? But it's because people are now coming, you know, into Northumberland to use our services. A couple of questions. So we know about the EHCPs, you know, the massive increase. We have a task and finish group. But many schools and settings, this is page 108, many schools and settings believe the reasons for this growth include the actions in a minority of schools which are less inclusive, and mainstream schools lack the finances to support SEND learners. So this is what they think.
Yeah.
And it's those last 2 points which I'm a bit concerned about. This is their opinion. I'm a bit concerned about what they believe, because why would that be? That's my first one. My second one is on page 117. So obviously we're working at improving attendance. And on there it says, so we've got a DFE electronic register system used by the majority of Northumberland schools.
Yeah.
Why just the majority? What's the reasons behind not everybody using them? Are some refusing to do it? Is there a barrier to stop them all using it? So if you can just answer
Yeah,
that
no
for me.
problem. I'll answer that one first, if that's okay. That's the more straightforward one of your questions. The attendance tool was introduced 18 months ago, and all about 70% of schools used it straight away. Became statutory on the 1st of September, so now 100% of schools use it. So this is a report for the previous academic year. It was adopted by many, but not all. They had their own systems in place and bits and pieces. And we already had some systems in place to do some of that work, but we don't need to do that centrally anymore because there is a national tool that does it. So it's 100% in place now from that perspective.
I'm still going back to the register.
Yeah, none of that. Live reporting on a daily basis, updated nationally every night, 24 hours turnaround. This is a transparent report. I try to in anything that we deliver, try to not shy away from stuff that might be more challenging in terms of topic area. But you did pick up absolutely on the wording there that it's some schools believe. So if you went to an open forum of school leaders, of Senkos, of any school staff and said, why do you think this is the case? So there is a perception in some that would say, well, some of our schools aren't as inclusive as we are. Could be a viewpoint that comes across. There'll be others, it might be a Senko that will say, well, I'd like to do more, but the resources, the finances at my school aren't directed enough towards that for me to make the progress. The reason I've listed them here in particular is because if there are scenarios where that is the case, clearly that needs to be challenged. And our knowledge of schools, a lot of with the appropriate data to support that, means there is ongoing support and challenge to a small and shrinking number of our schools where some of their data would indicate they're not as inclusive as another school down the road. It doesn't mean that they are a non-inclusive school who never supports learners with particular needs. It would just indicate that there are others in the area doing an even more, an amazing job. And the question is, how are they able to do that and you not? And actually, one thing that has occurred, again, probably over the last 18 months, so we're still on the journey now, but is possibly a number of schools who we have highlighted to them that possibly their exclusion data might be a little bit out of sync with what we would expect or what we'd hope for against another school in Northumberland in similar circumstances, that those schools are recognising that. And I do have head teachers who are now, who in the past might have said, well, we're sticking to cause not doing anything statutorily wrong, they're not breaking any rules, but their application of their powers maybe has led to an outcome, and they're coming to us now and saying, we recognise that possibly our exclusion rates are too high. What is it that the other schools are doing in order to manage those, so that we can change ourselves and our own practices in order to do that? So I'm highlighting them here. They might be viewpoints that could be heard. It doesn't mean they're necessarily true in every scenario, but what it is by shining a focus there and saying that these things are being said, then how do we get on top of that and get around that? And I would suggest that there is already progress, particularly in terms of inclusivity of schools. Those whose figures are not as high as others are working desperately hard on doing that. We've managed to both challenge and support in an appropriate way that they're changing and adopting better practices, maybe might be a better way, adopting better practices that they recognise at other schools. From the finances perspective, we are aware and we have discussed some of the challenges around high needs block, the increase in the numbers of learners requiring additional support and additional resources, and that growth, the value of the high needs block hasn't matched that. Though there are schools that manage to make efficiencies or work in a different way in order to still meet needs, our specialist support bases will be a perfect example, or schools that have something similar to a specialist support base, where they've identified learners and grouped them together or identified need, done specific training on that need, so now they can actually deliver to needs on a more cost-effective basis. It's not that they're trying to save the money, but they're using the money they've got more efficiently in order to do that. So we've got some successes in that area, but we shouldn't shy away from the fact that some schools will say, we've got some finance challenges around SEND, so we need to identify and work with them. An example would be, I'm visiting a school tomorrow that I've been working with over the last term, who were saying that last summer. I'm looking forward to my budgets. Things aren't quite going together as we would expect them to be. I'm concerned about how I'm going to meet these SEND needs. So we've worked really closely with them in terms of working with them to improve their efficiency, getting an additional support and training to make sure they can meet needs within the financial environment they've got. And actually my meeting on Friday is to go, so we're in a really good position, you're a super inclusive school. We've used the resources as efficiently as possible. There is still a gap. It's not a massive gap actually in finances, but what we now need to do is to ensure that the bandings, the top-up bandings for the learners at that school are reflective of the cost of the delivery. And so there will be some banding changes at that school. It will draw on the high needs block, but we know it's absolutely appropriate, absolutely the most efficient use to meet needs as close to home as possible, high levels of need, and also enable that school to get over that barrier in their mind. It was a real barrier. It was something that we needed to focus on, but in supporting them to do so, and we are doing that more and more.
Okay, thank you. If I can just come back on that. Now, I'm pleased that we're going out and providing extra support on there. And I think one of the key sentences that you had earlier in your explanation was where some schools are not directing the financial support in the right way. So it's not entirely that it's not there, it's just that it's not being directed appropriately, and that's what you said early on in the explanation. So, but I'm pleased that we're going out and helping them to address that.
Yeah, I would say that there's no conscious desire from a school to direct resources in a particular way or other. Absolutely not. What we are trying to get, and I think our partnership with schools of all types, I think has never been stronger, because we really are saying, collectively we're in this together, and where schools are finding that maybe they can't find the solution, they're recognising that other schools are finding the solution. Possibly 5 or 6 years ago, we might have needed to look outside of Northumberland to find a school that was managing the challenges absolutely in a really inclusive way, and so on and so forth. But now we've got multiple, the majority of Northumberland schools meeting need close to home, and we're now looking at a much smaller proportion, and those guys are asking for the help, which is great. And B, we, through sharing the best practice from others, organise it like this. What does the figures add up to now? Are we meeting need? Brilliant.
Thank you, David. Mr. Hodgson, and then I've got Steve Bird.
I mean, obviously, a lot of what I'm going to ask has already been covered, but just a couple of little points there. I mean, yes, there's a lot of positives, and obviously the Ofsted inspections, 94% of schools that are above, which is, figures we've never had for years and years, haven't we? But interestingly, if you drill down a little bit, the academic outcomes are not really what we should be expecting. They're disappointing. Would you agree to a certain extent? I mean, we're not making the sort of progress that you would imagine. If you're saying that all the schools are deemed good, 94%, and yet nationally and regionally we're not actually getting the outcomes that we would expect. And then linked to that, attendance is still pulling us back there. And that link between attendance and outcomes is so strong, and that's there. And I expect it's trying to break that. And then the other link is that exclusion figure. And we had that concern a couple of years ago. We looked at it, and some of the figures for exclusions were exceptionally high. I mean, it was frighteningly high, really. And one of the questions I put then was, is it because there's not what we call sufficient alternative provision, or is it that it's put too much pressure on the schools in the sense that alternative provision can be expensive, and therefore is just simply an exclusion, permanent exclusion, an easier option? So I expect they're all linked to a certain extent. We've got disappointing outcomes, fantastic Ofsteds, disappointing attendances, and still quite high exclusions. And I mean, quaintly, you call them suspensions. I thought it was temporary exclusions. Now it was just quite a quaint.
The national terminology has changed back to suspension.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That, yeah. Right. So that was it. So that was that part, and the other part was, the second part was the which Mark touched on, and you answered in detail there. But just comparative figures. With the increase in EHCPs, are we in line nationally with that increase and regionally, or are we an outlier?
I'll try and get a lot of that's interconnected, so I'll do my best. If I miss something, please come back to me. So, from the growth in the number of EHCPs is reflective of national. We're possibly a little bit further on than that, actually. Right. So we're not a massive outlier in any way, shape or form, but we probably are above the national. But nationally, the growth has been sort of exponential from a SEND perspective. In terms of our attendance figures and also in terms of our outcomes, we are in line. We're not dramatically different to our northeast colleagues, but there are better outcomes some other places in the country. Further south, London in particular, has shown a sharper bounce back post-COVID. And I know that's in the I'm not just using that as a time scale, not as a reason in any way, shape or form. But the northeast hasn't recovered and bounced back as well as some of the other areas, and we're included in that. And we remain with exceptionally high aspirations for our academic outcomes. And what we're looking at here, obviously, is a set of averages. And so within those averages, we do have some exceptionally strong results at a high number of schools. We have, and actually, the results here is a bit technical, but they are, the national way of calculating is an average of the schools, i.e. each school's value is the same. Whereas in Northumberland, some of our larger schools are the ones that are having the very high outcomes, but yet they count the same against a smaller school with some slightly lower outcomes from an academic perspective. So it does skew it slightly against our national view. But the way the national's calculated is each school has an outcome and they're counted equally. And across the nation, it averages itself out with the big ones and the small ones. But in Northumberland, there's an element to that. But I can't really report that because that's not the way it's reported nationally. So that would have some confusion. But I quite like you mentioned it, so I got a chance to say it. The other aspect to it is the broader outcomes. So, for example, I have had obviously some significant meetings with some specific schools who didn't do as well as they were expecting to do, and they wanted to have a conversation about that. Some of those schools contacted me directly to have that conversation. But actually, when I got there and we said, so talk to me about the destinations of these young people, how many, and I was literally there on results day and in the weeks after, to say how many of them didn't access the college course that they were aiming to access? Oh, none. How many of them didn't go into the training provider that they wanted, that they were aiming to get to? None. They might not have got the grades that we would have wished them to get, and this is on an individual basis, but at this point in time, at that particular school, when literally went through all the learners in year 11, how many of them didn't get to go where they wanted to go? And the answer was none. So the outcome was the same as it would have been with a higher academic outcome, if you know what I mean. But that doesn't mean there's any complacency at either that school they wanted to and at others.
Just as well, it was just that the fact is that if you're going into Key Stage 3 and you're below the national standards, you're playing catch-up, and that's going to put additional pressure on the high schools, and invariably their budgets are stretched for it because potentially it could be additional staffing that's required. It becomes a vicious circle, doesn't it?
Yeah, and probably the highlight that the report has on Key Stage 2 outcomes, if you look back historically, the outcomes at Key Stage 2 have been stronger than they were this year. You can imagine that continues to be, obviously it's a high area of focus, full stop, but particularly so for our school improvement team to respond and to support those schools. And again, individually identified, they're self-identifying anyway. You know, this is our relationship with schools, regardless of what it says on the door of what type of school it is, are immediately responding and coming back to school improvement teams, school improvement partners, etc. We get the data live when they get it and respond accordingly. Again, it's another reason why it's highlighted in the report and some of the areas for development going forwards. We want to be transparent and clear. And also, therefore, the higher emphasis on the requirements for transition for a learner who maybe didn't get didn't get the outcomes at the end of Key Stage 2 that we would have wished or thought that they were going to get to, is that they are highlighted for the high schools and the secondary schools going forwards, so that they know the additional capacity that needs to be put in to support that. Key Stage 3, it continues to be a significantly high focus, and coming back to the suspensions and exclusions, there is a connection, and Key Stage 3 is a hotspot at the moment. It hasn't been historically. So I probably will be reporting at this point to you good selves, before then as well actually, about whether this is a blip or whether there's a trend here which needs us to look at things in a very different way. But I do think schools are responding, both with attitude and actions to better meet the needs of the young people, and therefore have a much impact on the outcomes for those young people.
Are you getting feedback, you know, like we said, the pressure that's being put on schools financially to provide for the EHCPs and so on there? I mean, that must be pretty severe at times, I would imagine.
Like I said, we've got methodology now where we're having much more dialogue. So that perception that I've listed in the report, trying to counter that perception by sharing skills and knowledge of whole school budgets. As an example, it is a really firm recommendation from us as a local authority that the SENCO should be on the senior leadership team of every school. In many of our schools, it is the head teacher, so they're there already. I think. But certainly in the larger schools, I'd be surprised if we found that wasn't the picture. Therefore, the SENCO not only knows their area of work and expertise really well, and all the learners with special education needs within their school, but also knows the budgetary aspects of the whole school really well, and therefore can make sure that that those needs are highlighted, and that the planning of the budget going forwards is as efficient as possible. And where it's not, or where there is a barrier, that actually people are reaching out to say, this isn't working for me, what are my avenues? And we're much better connected to that respect, both in recognising the challenges and doing something about it.
So I think there's an assurance there that David doesn't wake up one morning and go, oh, crikey, things aren't looking very good here, there.
Oh,
This is hour by hour live data, conversations with schools, colleges or leaders in order to try to address this. And as he's rightly pointed out there, that Key Stage 3 area, we'll be getting a report coming to this committee to look at whether it is a blip or whether there's something bigger in the system. And that will in itself draw out some actions from us. So I just want to provide that assurance to members that we're onto that. If I can bring Steve Bird in now, please.
Yeah, colleagues. Chair, I just would like to commend you and applaud you actually on your commentary a little while ago regarding the academic outcomes and the Ofsted results in Northumberland. And I just want to point out, I'm really disappointed with the final paragraph, the final sentence really, on section 10 on the academic outcomes page, where apparently the good Ofsted results are down to the hard work of school leaders supported by the local authority improvement team. That is a really disappointing comment. And I refer, Chair, to your comment about commending everybody from the school lunchtime supervisor right up to the head teacher. Point made.
I apologise for anything that's in the report which leads to a thought that there isn't a consideration and support of our partnership with everybody working in the sector. And I think in my introduction, you'll see that we thank all school settings and education providers for their work, skills and talents highlighted throughout this report. It is the determination of those organisations and the individuals within them that have delivered many successes. So my introduction, hopefully, it reiterates my and collectively local authorities' true thoughts about the exceptional work from the staff within our schools. And I apologise if any further comments led anybody to think differently. Because the support is there in the introduction and continually reiterated by myself now and going forward.
We do constantly, and I do reaffirm that everybody's part of a team. So, good. So, thank you very much for that. We are now at items number 7 and 8 are kind of linked, but I know Sue wants to take them in there. Oh, sorry. Go. Okay, so we are now moving on to the next set of items on the agenda, which are kind of linked, items 7 and 8, but I know Sue wants to take them separately. So first of all, Sue, if you can take the school organisation plan, which is on page 121 to 184 in your pack. Sue, if you can take that report, please.
Certainly, Chair. Just to remind everybody that the school organisation plan is a 5-year plan that we produce. Obviously, it's not a statutory requirement, as we've said before. The last reiteration of this was in September 2021, but we did agree that we would bring updates on the data and school information into fact scrutiny on a regular basis in order that we can update you on the landscape across our schools in Northumberland. Just to say before I move into anything more formally, there has been an updated number of surplus places provided, and I've provided members with a new update of the map at the beginning of the meeting. So now, for clarity, particularly in 3.3 and 5.4, our places in surplus places in Northumberland do now stand at 21%, and that is 10,034 surplus places across all of our schools and academies across Northumberland. Okay, so just some of the key issues. Again, as I've already said, it's no longer a statutory requirement for local authorities to produce a school organisation plan. However, school organisation plan assists us as officers, schools, parents and partners to understand how the availability of school places across the county are monitored, and how the need for adding or removing school places may be identified, and in the case of additional places, how they may be delivered, funded within the relevant school partnership. It also provides information on changes to organisational structures and opening and closing of schools, as well as the capital works undertaken at schools and academies across the county. So it brings together a lot of our work that we do in partnership, as I said, with our schools and academies. I'll try to keep this brief, but this is really just the updates in terms of the data since the last time you received the report. So what I can tell you is there's a fall of 1.5% of children and young people of statutory school age across Northumberland. So that is obviously having that impact on surplus places that I've already mentioned. So this is a fall in the birth rate. But there is also a national fall in the birth rate, but it obviously impacts on some of our school partnerships more strongly in the far north of our region and the far west, as you'll see from the map provided that identifies the surplus places. The other thing, again, and I think that, some of the things that have already been said this morning is how popular, not only our services in terms of our skills service, but our schools tend to be outside of our county, with a number of children attending from neighbouring authorities. That really helps with the viability of some of our schools. Particularly, we see a significant amount moving into Corbridge and through to Queen Elizabeth High School, as well as into our system in Ponteland. And again, some movement in the Seaton Valley part of our county with North Tyneside. But again, in line with their falling birth rates, we're also seeing a 2% reduction on the number of children that are coming out of county and into our Northumberland schools. So therefore our own birth rate is falling, as our neighbouring authorities' birth rates falling. Therefore our inward migration has reduced since the last time that we shared this report. So that's just about 5% of our pupil population now comes across border into Northumberland schools. Again, that increase in surplus places, the last time I presented the report, we had just over 9,000 surplus places in January 22, which was 18% overall. That has now increased to 21%, with just over 10,000 surplus places since 2022. One of the other things that we set out in the school organisation plan really confirms around where we're getting funding from. So there's a further update there around the confirmed contributions that we've achieved via section 106. So that currently stands at £17.3 million that we've had agreed by developers to support education infrastructure. There is a further £15 million in negotiation currently with developers. So that takes us, to just over nearly 33 million additional funding coming into the county to address that infrastructure that we need within education as a result of building around another 7,000 new homes that we can see is predicted to be built right through to 2028 across the county. And I think that really gives you all the highlights. Really, just to say this, and the strategy for managing those surplus places across Northumberland really lies within the strategy of reducing planned admission numbers, ensuring all of our schools remain educationally and financially viable by ensuring that there's a fair distribution of those pupils. You'll remember as FACS members, I think we have brought 7 or 8 changes to planned admission number over the last couple of years, and there's a further one that we've just been consulting on for this year that will be going to Cabinet in February, and that's regarding the reduced planned admission number of the SEAL First School, again in order to ensure that fair distribution of pupils within the partnership, and that remains our strategy moving forward.
Thank you, Sue. Happy to take questions, and I'm assuming everyone has got the map with the new figure. So Suzanne and then Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Obviously, we've discussed some of this already because there's been a contentious issue, as we know, in our area. And it's sort of relevant to page 171. I'd like to say about the reducing the risk of school closures. What you're doing in relation to certainly the Hexham partnership is brave, and it does require what you're doing, whether it's temporary. I don't know how long it might be pertinent for. It obviously depends on people having babies and building homes and all of that stuff that we can't always influence. So yes, and there's been a lot of backlash against cutting one of the PANs for the reason of parent choice. Now, again, parent choice is very important, and it's important to the now, but it's also important to the future. And I think what you're doing is safeguarding the future of other rural schools that we look forward to save in 2017, and spreading that wealth across the valley. My concerns are, obviously we have influence over the PANs at these schools, but we really don't have a lot of influence, as we know, over academy PAN places. And obviously where that's happening higher up, and you're getting one school draining other areas, that is tricky. Who controls the authority on that?
So that current authority really lies with the schools adjudicator. So there is an opportunity to appeal to the schools adjudicator where we feel that there hasn't been fair treatment. And again, we have done that on occasions. I think what I will say is, obviously with the new children's bill coming to fruition, there will be greater powers for the local authority around planned admission numbers, around admissions, and that fair treatment and open of offer. So we're hopeful that landscape will be changing in the near future, and the local authority's voice will be a louder voice in any decision making in the future.
Thank you. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. Just a few points. Firstly, excuse me, and I ask this every time, can this be shared with all members? Because members repeatedly have questions asked of them about, all the building that's going on. There's never going to be enough room in the school, etc. And this provides a lot of significant detail about what's going to happen, how you come to those calculations, and with the best will in the world, as we know and we've seen in this committee before, we plan as much as we can, but there's no taking into account individuals' preferences, and no matter where you live, we want to go there, we want to go there, we want to go there, and that changes regularly and on a monthly basis. Excuse me, the team have to sit there and calculate and recalculate and so on and so on. So it's a fantastic achievement that the team does. But a couple of things, page 133, it has the existing forecasts where there's an increase to 339,415 by 2043. I'm assuming that's based on the current Northumberland local plan figures and not on the new figures of housing expansion that are being proposed by the government, because that would be considerably higher than that.
That's correct.
Okay. And one more point, and this is on behalf of some of my colleagues who I know have been asking the question, and it's with regard to Seaton Valley forecasts. With regards to the upcoming closure of Monk Seaton, is it possible to liaise with them about any potential forecast, change in forecasts because of the fallout of Monk Seaton, which should predominantly go to Whitley Bay, but could have an effect on Seaton Valley. So if we can just keep touch with the Seaton Valley members and the schools around there, because it could have an effect on them.
Yeah, just to say that that's a statutory duty of ours anyway, to liaise across borders with our nearest neighbours, and as a collective, Newcastle, North Tyneside and Northumberland, we meet on a regular basis as school organisation teams because of that migration of pupils backwards and forwards. So that's just part of our day-to-day work. We do that anyway, regardless of the change. But what I can say to members is that we really haven't seen a rush on admissions into Northumberland schools following the announcement of the closure of Monk Seaton. So at the moment it is not causing us any immediate issues, but we'll certainly pick up on your point in making sure that we reflect any changes in our data moving forward.
Les Bowman.
Thank you for the plan. I'm basically a statistician. I love figures, and I don't know why, but I like forecasts and things. I know forecasting is very difficult. You need a lot of information and data to bring out the points, as it were. I know for a fact it isn't just done out of thin air. There's a lot of work has gone into it. And there are plans for the future, and I think I've mentioned this in the past. When the Northumberland line was planned, the idea was that there would be a lot of house building along the corridor of the Northumberland line, which is still on the cards, as it were, and a lot of house building. So we're talking about Seaton Valley and Blythe and Wansbeck, areas where there is a possibility of increases. Have you taken that into account? And can I make a point about North Tyneside? Well, they've actually decided to close the school because of low numbers. It's a high school, and it's nice to think that the residents who sent their children to North Tyneside are now looking to come back to Northumberland, which is absolutely amazing. And I just want to thank you as well on the back of that they'll be going into a new school in September. So we're talking about two new schools, which is Wheatrick Middle and Astley High School. And what a fantastic time to come back to Northumberland.
So I think your question there about the numbers, Sue answered previously with Councillor Swinburne, which is this is based on current projections and knowledge of what we know, which includes the Northumberland line. So, yeah, and people are always welcome back in Northumberland. Any other questions? No? And again, just the point I've made earlier, Sue doesn't wake up one morning and go, oh, I've had these figures, I've just suddenly landed, but this is live data. She does this every day. In fact, you don't even go home, do you, most of the time? So I think what we've got here, we had a massive conversation back in 2017 about future of our schools, and I think the conversation with school leaders is how we preserve and protect our school network. and how we can work with them to best, because obviously some areas the school is miles away from other schools. So I think what we've got here is very good, accurate data about our current position, but more importantly, conversations that happen with our leaders to ensure that we continue to provide education for everyone in the county. So I think there's some assurance there for members on that one. Sue, are you all right to take us through item number 8 as well, which is send capacity
I
in
will.
place
There's a little
planning
bit more
as well.
information here as well. So again, I'm sure Scrutiny members will remember that I brought the first send capacity in place planning strategy to this committee in November 2022. And again, like the school organisation plan, we agreed that we would bring regular updates to the committee, particularly given the growth around special educational needs and the challenge that that brings to us as a local authority. So the strategy has slightly been updated in terms of all the data has been reviewed, but we've also added an additional section now. So the strategy is split into 7 sections. So we've got section 1 that looks at additional specialist provision that we need. There is a new section 2 that looks at our alternative provision. And like Mr Hodgson mentioned, that increase in permanent exclusions and the demand that we've got for alternative provision, and we felt that was very aligned with children that have additional needs. Section 3 shows where the increases of places and capital development have already been achieved, so celebrating some of the work that's already been undertaken. Section 4 talks about the forecasting, the methodology that we use to predict that capacity growth. Section 5 looks at the individual local communities. So again, using our school partnership to look at the impact the numbers are having at that very local level. Section 6 then looks at the ideas, models, timescales in order to look at how we could actually increase that capacity, and really sets out a timeline of when we go out, speak to school partnerships, and when potential consultations on changes may need to happen. And then finally, Section 7 sets out the funding available within the strategy to meet some of those needs. And again, that's made up of several pots of capital investment. So again, really just a bit of an update in terms of Section 1 of the strategy. And that is the number of children and young people who have been diagnosed as requiring an education, health and care plan has been steadily increasing at a rate of around 9 to 10% year on year. However, more recently, and in the 12 months we're reporting against here, there has been some significant growth, and we're looking at a 20% increase, and in fact a further 777 EHCPs since the last time I bought the strategy here. Again, to meet this increased demand, significant additional capacity in the county's 9 special schools has been required year on year over the last 10 years. And this has meant that we've created an additional 600 places over that period. And again, the latest update includes Gilbert Ward Academy, which is our first new special free school, which opened in September 2023, but again on a phased basis, initially taking just over 20 pupils, building up to the 80 pupils that it will be taking from September 2025. Again, growth and investment in our maintained schools through that strategy has ensured that we haven't had to increase the level of commission places at independent, out-of-county special schools, and therefore that level of growth at the more expensive placements hasn't really happened, and we've only commissioned an additional 29 places over the last 5 years. So that really does buck the national trend and does impact on our high needs block. And while we're predicting a deficit in the high needs block this year, many local authorities have a much greater deficit and have been in deficit for many, many years, whereas our strategy in Northumberland to this point has really paid off, and again supports that meeting need as close to home as possible. The data then in Table 4 shows the growth in EHCPs, as I've already talked about. And again, that growth isn't slowing down. Looking at the data a couple of days ago before coming into this meeting, we can see that we've reached the over 4,000 mark by the end of 2024 in the number of EHCPs that we've got across Northumberland. So as part of that growth in number of EHCPs, that grows the demand for special school places. And although this has had a significant impact on the council as well, not only from our high needs block, but also in terms of our transport implications and the fact we've seen the budget for home to school transport for 7 pupils increase by 50% since 2019-2020. And last year we spent just over £11 million on that budget of getting our special educational needs children to school. And again, the strategy picks that up, just so our members again understand it's much broader than the elements necessarily that just sit within education, send and skills, that we talk to other departments at, and we use the intelligence both in this send strategy and the school organisation plan to plan for the pressure points on other areas of the council's budget as well. I think I've already mentioned really that given the links between excluded students and their unmet SEND needs, we've now included a new section within the strategy at section 2. The identification of the additional quality and viability of alternative provision across Northumberland has really been incorporated in this strategy. Because we feel it really needs to join up our approach in our discussions with schools, not only about SEND, but also about alternative provision. And again, this reflects the SEND inspection framework that also includes not only SEND, but alternative provision. So again, joins up our approach across Northumberland. Section 3 sets out the investment and the growth that we've made. And since the last time I brought the report, we've completed 5 major schemes that are set out there for you, and that has again increased our capacity by just over 200 places. So we're not standing still. We continue to invest in this area, build to ensure that we have the right places in the right place at the right time. But demand is certainly outstripping availability as we move forward. So tables 14 and 15 in the strategy set out those forecasts between 2024 and 28, and they're based on the forecasting methodology. And again, based on that, we believe there will be an additional growth of around 18% for those pupils with a primary need of ASD, and around a 19% increase for pupils with a primary need of social, emotional and mental health issues. So what that means more broadly to us as a council is if that this growth is realised, and if the percentage of our learners with EHCPs continue to be educated in special schools were to remain at the current rate, which I believe is around 47% of those with EHCPs are currently educated in a specialist setting, we would need a further 1,700 places by 2028. But again, really just to reiterate, that doesn't take into account any strategies and things that are working in order to stem that flow. The work with our schools around ensuring that those needs can be met as close to home as possible. Again, it feeds into the school organisation plan that we've talked about, surplus places in schools. How can we reuse those places, potentially empty classrooms, to meet the needs of children as close to home as possible? And therefore, this is the reason behind the 2 strategies coming together, because actually where there is a reduction, there is also an opportunity then to meet demand and work with our special school heads, our local head teachers, to come up with local solutions that then also has a positive impact on that transport budget that I've also spoken about, and that strain on that, that budget increasing by 50% in the last couple of years. So again, all that methodology is set out as how we do those predictions. As we've said, predictions are the best guess. Yes, it's based on data, but lots of things can change, hence why it is very much a live tool, as Chair has said. So I think really that, that sets out the direction of travel. The strategy will remain. We need to continue letting us do our job. We need to get out to partnerships and come up with local solutions. Fortunately, Northumberland County Council has put money in place to enable us to do that. We've currently got £25 million in order to support this strategy moving forward. And again, as you've heard me say around Section 106 funding as part of school organisation, a significant amount of that money is for special educational needs growth as well. So hopefully members can see how the two strategies are coming together and why it is really important that we treat it as one, but look at it more broadly. Thanks.
So I've got Mark and then I've got Trevor indicated. So Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was very important that you highlighted the knock-on effect there of the EHCPs, that it's not just the schools, the rise in numbers, but the additional on costs of the travel implications as well, and how those are going up. So it's not just one thing, it's everything else that affects as well. And we're talking £11 million, that's just going to go up and up and up. So we need to do something about that as well, because whatever we do on one side will affect that. So if we can address this increase, it's going to help to bring that down. I'm very conscious of the figures that are published on page 227, which is the Cramlington Partnership, and the increase quite significantly in projected figures there. And on page 243, where we're looking at the future there, it's got Cramlington, Hillcrest potential to become all-age provision on the current site. So that's on my ward, and we know that there's a lot of land around Hillcrest, that is attached to that. So that is quite a possibility there, to expand on that. I would support that. I think that is definitely something that we need to look at, but I do have a proviso. The current access to Hillcrest is through Cramlington Village, which is a conservation area, and there are already issues with overspill and parking. So if we look, and I hope we do look at progressing this, can we look at a separate access point, remove access from the Cramlington Village and look at accessing from Northumbrian Road, from the bottom main road, because it's a big wide road. There's lots and lots of land and access from that bottom road, and that will be a much more sensible access point, especially if we're looking at making it a much bigger school. But I would fully support expanding that, meeting our provision, and there is plenty of land there. Thank you.
So perhaps we could take that into a separate meeting, because that's a very specific thing for your area, and I'm sure Sue would be happy to link up with you to have a discussion on that.
Yeah, certainly. Just to say though that any business case for a new school would look at all options, all constraints, all issues before any decision around making investment in, as we would do with any planning application. We need to address all those concerns. So yeah, certainly be part of that discussion.
So Mark, if you can arrange a meeting with Sue, that would be helpful. I've got Trevor and then I've got Georgina, and we'll move progress because we need to move on to the final item.
Quite a worrying leap in send places. And, I find it, I'm just puzzled to understand how you can predict the large increases. Is part of it, are we getting a lot better at understanding the needs of the children, the SEND children? Or have you got some information that fuels this sort of doubling in SEND provision? I'm just at a loss as to how you're predicting this.
I think that was something that was a question from this group, and that's why your working party was set up to actually look at it. It isn't a simple answer. It's very complex, isn't it? I think what this plan does is say if it carries on, you know, the level of growth that we've got, these are the numbers that we're looking at. And I think there's many things that come into play. Early diagnosis, isn't there? Schools identifying things, children getting into early education earlier with the new initiatives, being in nurseries, being with others, etc. So I just really think it's probably the work of the working party to come to that conclusion, and I'm sure David will, because I haven't been involved in it, I'll know a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, there's national inquiry currently, because this isn't the scenario that Sue's described is mirrored across the country. It's not just a Northumberland or even just a North East issue. The Sue's end of the business, I suppose, is delivering on demand. And it probably is more my end of the business to try and work out what the reasons are and whether there's any way that we can positively influence those reasons.
Thank you. Thanks.
Georgina.
Just a quick question. I was actually just trying to find a communication I had from a parent, not to give their name, of course, but I can't find it just now. But if we're talking about all the strategies regarding improvements to SEND, if there's a school that is quite obviously, by the evidence of complaints and concerns, not equipped to deal appropriately, effectively with SEND children, I talk about this strategy for the whole county. How long do you envisage it will take for meaningful improvement in that area? If a school is currently failing on that area, with your strategy, how specifically do you see that changing and what rough time scale?
Okay, we are all schools are in a cycle of continuous improvement. Special educational needs is almost exclusively every school is top priority currently because of the growth. I just would like to challenge you slightly on, I'm not aware of any schools in Northumberland who are incapable of meeting the needs of special learners with special educational needs. The reason I know that is because every single one of the schools in Northumberland, bar maybe a tiny handful of very small schools who don't have a learner with an EHC plan, and most do, but all of those schools that have learners with the EHC plans, we do have those needs being met right now at this particular. That doesn't mean every need of every learner is being met continuously, and we must liaise with parents and families in order to make sure that what the provision in place is meeting need. But we've got over 4,000 learners now with an EHC plan across our schools in Northumberland, and the vast majority of them are having their needs well met in their local mainstream school. And that would include every local mainstream school.
So I'm not quite sure how you're, you think if it's not picked up in an Ofsted or on the basis of who's on a plan, but if a school is quite anecdoted by evidence and that feedback you had, a constant pattern of feedback coming, incapable of dealing and sometimes passing this on to another school or elsewhere, I don't see quite where you can come to a definite conclusion there's no school that is performing badly in relation to SEND provision. I don't know what your scientific proof to say there isn't any.
We've all got every school will have this as an improvement area. If you do have some specific concerns, do deal with specific concerns on a daily basis, I'm happy to take that outside of this meeting. But I am saying that there is a huge amount of evidence that demonstrates that every single one of our schools with the HCP learners is meeting the needs of the vast majority of those learners. That doesn't mean they're meeting the needs of absolutely every single one, and that there isn't a legitimate parental challenge, but I'd be happy to hear about that and then work with that. Your questions seem to indicate that we had some schools failing to meet learners with special educational needs, sort of wholesale, and I'm refuting that and saying that isn't the case. Areas for improvement, definitely. And if there's the specific school that you're concerned about, then obviously I can share with you the focus that we've already got in and around that school.
So if you can pick that up as an action, David, with Georgina, that would be great. And finally, Les.
It's just a thought. I was just thinking about parental choice. Does that come into mind when you're actually drawing up these tables? Do you have data on that, where people are choosing to send their children? Not just on SEND, but on the normal education schools? Do you have that data as well?
Yeah, so the algorithm that lies behind all of this data does take that into account in terms of the children that move into a school's catchment area, that drive into the school's catchment area to attend. So a bit what we call a popularity factor. So we do build that popularity factor into the predictions so that the school numbers are more robust and not just built on children born within their geographical catchment area.
Okay, so we've had thorough discussion on both those points. So, Sue, thank you very much for your presentations this morning. The final substantive item on the agenda is an update, a verbal update, I believe, on the Berwick partnership, which again, I think Sue is going to be done by you. Yep.
The recruitment and selection process, the support for securing alternative employment, and a buildings update as well, because action is now happening on the ground, ready for September. So as previously reported, we're continuing to work with all trade unions. We met with them yesterday. We've got another meeting today. We continue to work with our chairs of governors in middle schools. Again, we met with them on Monday. We met with them yesterday. So that is a regular touch point for us. And we continue to work on some of the tools in the box around retention and compensation principles. That's ensuring that we have the right staff numbers in our middle schools, particularly right through to the closure of them on the 31st of August 2026. Just to say, we're also now in our second phase of recruitment and selection. So again, there were a further 21 vacancies that 18 or 19 of those weren't filled as part of the round one recruitment. So there are 21 which are existing, and 2 new ones were advertised to staff for about a month before Christmas, and we've received 7 applications from at-risk staff for those 21 posts, and those interviews will be starting in the next 2 weeks to complete that recruitment process. We currently still have 67 staff that remain at risk, and these include the 20 that were unsuccessful in phase 1 of recruitment, and 47 staff that have yet to engage in the process at all. And I think I've talked about the bottom bit. Again, in terms of further work on the staffing protocol, we did agree with union colleagues that we would go out and seek expressions of interest around voluntary redundancy. So there may have been an opportunity to let staff leave in September 25 rather than remain at the end, and there was an opportunity for people to volunteer for redundancy. So again, there was about 5 weeks for staff to come back in expressing an interest. So as part of that process, we had 20 staff express an interest in voluntary redundancy, 3 from the teaching sector and 17 from non-teaching. We had 4 staff that said they weren't interested in voluntary redundancy and they really wanted to seek alternative employment. We then had 11 staff who said they were seeking further clarification from their union before they'd state a preference, and 22 didn't respond at all. So that is a key piece of work for our contact officers who are supporting those staff that remain at risk in securing alternative employment. So again, each member of that list of 67 have an individual officer that is reaching out, having individual meetings to understand their career aspirations and supporting them with training, development, interview preparation and looking at any external training that may have been requested. But again, not everyone is engaged in that process. There's around 30% still yet to take up that offer of an individual meeting and discussion. But where there has been that engagement, and it's a pity Steve has left the room, because he again was reporting to us yesterday that there'd been some real positive meetings, both from the from the individual's point of view as well as from us as a local authority. That network of support is proving very, very successful. So again, there are some interview technique training that's happening next week for staff ahead of their interviews for phase 2. So again, we'll continue in this vein supporting those staff right the way through. Oh, sorry, I've gone the wrong way. Apologies. In terms of a building update, I just kept this bullet point in from the last update because there always seems to be probably a little bit of a misunderstanding about the numbers around Berwick. So I thought it was really important just to reiterate the budget and where we currently stand. So again, the budget currently stands at 50.225 million. Of that, 8.2 million is for the primary reorganisation, and the remainder, just over 42 million, is for investment in Berwick Academy. Just to say that there are ongoing discussions with the Department of Education regarding their contribution to the project, and additional survey work is currently being undertaken at Berwick Academy to influence that discussion as we move forward. So I think that is a little bit of an update from the last time. Berwick Academy, again, we are... it's difficult at this stage of the process to share things publicly because of perhaps some of the commercial sensitivities around how we develop an outline business case, but there is a lot of work going on in the background to bring the outline business case to fruition. And again, as I've said on the second bullet point, due diligence on the future sponsorship of Berwick Academy is also continuing, as are the discussions with the Department of Education. The things that are a little bit more in our control, and those are the works at Scrumston, Holy Trinity and Tweedmouth First School. Again, those works are progressing on programme with the appointment of porter cabin. I think we've just signed off their detailed designs now. There's some further work to do for Holy Trinity, but again, getting to a point of agreement both with the trust that own the land, the governing body and ourselves as we move forward. So again, everything remains on programme to complete for September 2025. Berwick St Mary's, again, this is a remodelling of an existing school. So again, the planning application has now been lodged. There have been some challenges for us with Sport England, hence why there's been some reiteration. So again, that planning committee is programmed for March, with the work to start in the spring of 2025 on the site. But again, as you remember, that school is shrinking in size for its mainstream and growing in terms of its special educational needs. So the building work will be done in a more phased way that actually work around those pupil numbers and the demands. Again, we've done quite a lot of work out at Wooler, meetings with local elected members, and the school to develop the next stage, which really looks at the community element. The school element of the building is all agreed, and we're in the process of appointing a contractor to undertake those works. There's some minor planning amendment that we needed around fencing, and again, all of that was agreed back in December. Those works that need to happen there. And again, the smaller works, they're being undertaken by our own property services team, and again, all that is in programme, and we'll be ready to go in September. And that's kind of it. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Any questions? Georgina, go ahead.
Thank you. Couple of points. Well, first, it's just a question. You said that there's been positive discussions with the unions. So first question is, are you confident there's not going to be any more strikes? My second sort of commentary that to get a response from you for is, I'm going to play my broken record. It's a slightly different version on what I've said many times about the school building. In about 6 weeks' time, it will be 4 years since £40 million was secured for a new school in Berwick, which was a extremely positive thing, quite evidently. And since then, nothing meaningful has been done to progress it. Now, I've got two assertions following that. The first is indisputable, the other one is you could dispute. My first point, therefore, is when children in Berwick and young people are being failed by poorer education outcomes, and there's been various things, reorganisation, that have been designed to change that. One of the key things was having modern facilities and not being in a crumbling old inefficient building which affect the finances of the school and so on. So, as a simple fact, 4 years have been wasted where there's been no progress, where children have been failed. That's the first point. Also, critically, people who are at the middle school in Berwick, who, you know, their children had COVID at a critical stage, and they're hitting the reorganisation, so they're going to have that disruption. And if they saw progress, if they saw pictures of drawings of new school, if they saw a spade in the ground, there'd be positivity, you know, go to a new school, things are happening. The fact that nothing's happened is adding to conversations, which obviously previous Ofsted report, I'm not going to send my child to Berwick Academy, I'm going to go to... So what does that mean? Fewer pupils. What does that mean? Less money. And then the cycle continues. So the fact nothing's been done as 4 years as a failure is incredibly damaging, and that's an indisputable fact that nothing's been done. What follows that is assertion that I've made that I actually doubt the administration's commitment, maybe to deliver that school. There's been talk of just now looking at an option survey. Quote, one of the options would be to do nothing. Maybe it just be a bit of a refurb. Some of the things you've said, although we all know it is election time, you know, as you know, shades of the A1 fiasco here. Talking now, there seems to be talk now about drawing up business plans, but why wasn't that done 4 years ago? So there's been a load of excuses used why there's been the delay, the indisputable fact of the delay. One of them has been, you know, waiting for reorganisation. Well, there was no option that we weren't going to need a new school. And plans could have been drawn up ahead of that. So that's nonsense. One of them just discovered the school is on a hill. You know, it's all nonsense. One excuse that's been used might be the real one, and that is that staff have been doing reorganisation and working in other schools. So therefore, it's a staffing issue. So if NCC, if this authority had spent a bit more money on staffing, would our children not have been failed? Would we be 4 years further on? Is that where the failure has been? Because it has been a failure.
Before I bring Sue in, just a couple of things. So I remember when I was deputy leader, I sat up here and said there was 15 million for Berwick. We then had a full council at which cross-party, everyone, pretty much everyone, voted to uplift that massively to the 40-odd million figure. So every single member, whatever their party, has got skin in the game on this happening. Now, I can see from conversations I've had with Sue and the others in the team, because obviously this is a planning issue and children's services, there is a lot of work which is being done behind the scenes. And I'll let Sue come into that, but I'll just give you one really clear example. Going back to when I was deputy leader back in 2017, one of the first meetings I attended was in Belford with senior school leaders from Berwick, talking about how it is they could have a better deal for Berwick and education. And those conversations have been going on, and it's been, I think, fair to say, quite in some cases challenging, but in other cases some really good opportunities have come out. So I think the assertion nothing has happened is wrong. I think what we actually have got, and I think this is an example of, believe it or not, this is my view, of some good practice here where you actually involve school leaders and community in driving forward change. Because remember, I was involved in a consultation where we did all that as well. So I think there's some good things to learn from this, but on the substantive point, that 15 became 40, became what it is now. Every single member of this council voted to back you on that. So we've got skin in the game on it, and the school needs to happen because that's the commitment. And I think
Sorry, can I just make an important clarification on
yeah.
what you've said? And what you did, and I think it's right now setting out the history because it's been going on so long, people have missed, yourself and the Director of Education at the time said, we want to show a commitment to Berwick to put money in to get the conversation at reorganisation, and it was a starting point, okay? So you deserve a lot of credit for getting those people around the table and putting that money in the first place. When the original proposal was 20 million, and I said before the meeting, a realistic starting point is 40 million because that's what Ponteland had. And why do children in Berwick not deserve what Ponteland had? When I asked the question before the meeting and said it should be more, why don't you put it up? Your administration didn't agree to that. It was only when an amendment was put. And the Senate would say that they were worried about the repercussions of not backing that motion rather than being a genuine commitment to spend that 40 million. It was only members of the Conservative who voted against it, 2 or 3, I believe, at the time. But just to set the history, you personally, and I put that on record, you deserve credit for setting the ball rolling. It's just frustrating and damaging that nothing meaningful has been done in that almost 4 years.
So let's talk, we'll bring Sue in now. Let's talk about what the pathway to getting that school built is. And we've had it on there, but I can tell you there's a commitment from the administration, from us all, because we all voted for that uplift in funding. So Sue, tell us.
Thank you. I think it's a conversation we've had many times before, really. And I think, when I've sat here, even in Scrutiny, telling you the journey we went on with Alnwick when we rebuilt Alnwick. And the fact is that we put in a bid for a new school from the Department of Education. It was a high school. Before the first spade was put in the ground, there was then reorganisation and consultation, and the school then became a secondary school. There was then even more complications around trying to get a building built, and we probably ended up it ended up costing the public purse probably about another £11 million at the time. Whereas actually, if we'd have made the decision and had the brave conversation around school organisation in Alnwick prior to putting a bid in for a new school, it would have saved the public purse by making that build more effective, easier to manage, not negotiating different land off different people. It became a very complex, costly exercise. Therefore, the lessons learned, as we always do for every project that we do, or lots of things we've talked about this morning, from safeguarding right through to school organisation. As an organisation, we look, we learn, and we move forward with that learning. Again, with that learning with Alnwick is exactly what we've done. In Hexham, when we went out, we did consultation. Again, another very brave step, but we've made sure that the organisation of schools is robust, and then the investment followed and was made into Queen Elizabeth High School. That also brought the middle school on board. Again, the same strategy was used in Seaton Valley, where we looked, and also, again, there was no appetite from the schools in that partnership. They wanted to remain 3-tier. However, the Federation wanted to bring their 2 middle schools together on the one site. Again, as a local authority, we tested that through public consultation. The decision was not to move Seaton Sluice Middle School, and therefore, in September, we'll be giving a nice new school to Astley and Whitrig, as Councillor Bowman has already said. So again, and again, Astley has been in the plan probably since the day I started 20 years ago. It was always going to be the first school that was going to be built. Things change, orders change. We need to make sure that we're making good financial decisions for the public purse, and investing in a system that is viable for the future is absolutely the strategy that this council has taken to invest that money in Berwick Academy. And it doesn't mean to say that officers are not working extremely hard in the background, looking at a variety of options to ensure that we achieve the best value for the public purse. We're unable to make that public at this time because of the I suppose, financial issues that may bring for us as a council, and a number of conversations that I've already reiterated need to conclude before, as an officer, I can put an outline business case with recommendations to Cabinet as how we can move forward. It is in the best interest of Northumberland County Council for us to have those conversations with the Department of Education, for them to come forward and make a contribution to this school. The school is their asset. It sits on their registry. It doesn't sit on ours as Northumberland County Council. The money we are asking for as a contribution to a new build school is based on the backlog maintenance that remain in that building and is a liability of the Department of Education and not Northumberland County Council. And to be honest, I wouldn't be doing my job properly if we didn't actually go through all of those discussions and make sure we do the best by Northumberland and Berwick at the same time.
Could have had those conversations several years ago with the Department of Education.
So sorry, all I was going to say was I think it would also be fair to note that looking at Queen Elizabeth and Hexham, Guy Opperman, the then MP, I know for years had been battling to get a contribution from DFE, which eventually came through. Discussions were underway before the general election with a senior minister in DFE, but then we had the general election, which also added a little bit of confusion to the mix. But I think it is right and proper that with the hundreds of millions that we've invested as a local authority into our school infrastructure, and if you have a look at what we're doing, it's mega compared to what other local authorities are doing. I think it's right and proper that DFE should make a contribution to something which sits on their asset list. And we're not asking them to pay for the whole thing. We're saying, put a little bit of skin in the game. So it's down to the MP, and I know Anne-Marie was doing it before, and it's now down to the current MP to put their 2 pence in to make sure that this happens. I know there's meetings happening, and I know that Sue's offered you private briefings about where we are, but we need to make this happen. We're on the same page. We need to make this happen, and the discussions are underway. All of that, what I would call back office stuff, has gone on. The work with the staff has gone on, the work with the schools, about designing what the concept could look like. We just need some of the final bits to be in, and then we start that.
There isn't a business plan, so you're going to go and ask for money. You don't know how much you need, you're just going to ask for a general contribution.
No, so the contribution will be based on the backlog maintenance figure. So that is the liability where, you know...
Sorry, can I just interrupt here? It's remiss of me because we've exceeded 3 hours, even with taking into account the 5-minute break we had. I need to get agreement from members that I suspend standing orders to continue this conversation. It's a process. So I just have agreement that we suspend standing orders. Fine, we can now continue. Sue, sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay. So it's not a business case, in effect. It is the principles we used when the DFE made the contribution to Hexham, and that was the responsibility around the maintenance of the existing building. So we are just putting the same principles on the table to have that negotiation and discussion with the Department of Education. When I said that we're having further surveys done, that's some of the survey work that's been updated in order to have that updated conversation.
So, and I know Audrey wants to come in, but I would reinforce the offer of a confidential briefing with Sue, who'll tell you some of the stuff which sits behind it, which isn't necessarily in the public domain, and rightly so because of confidentiality and commercial things. But I think take that conversation up, and I think that would be helpful. Audrey, would you like to add something?
Apologies, forgot my button. So I'd just like to summarise, because I think we're all on the same page. There isn't anybody who hasn't got the drive and determination. I'm really disappointed to hear that you feel there's no progress. There is significant work. You know, and Councillor Bowman knows, you currently sit in a forum with all the local members in the Astley partnership, and you have briefings routinely. We do exactly the same for Coquet, and we do exactly the same for Berwick. So that progress is known. DFE were brought to the table. That wasn't there when these conversations started, when we did 3 years of consultation with the community, with staff, with children, with schools, head teachers and governors. I cannot emphasise enough the amount of work that has gone on to get Berwick to where it is now, which is further than it's ever been before. So I would not be doing my job if I didn't say how disappointed I was to hear that. Thank you.
So, as an action, if we can take up that briefing so Sue can give you some additional updates. And then I think there will be further reports coming to this committee, but I think it's right to say that officers have done, and I know that they have, and from when I was deputy leader, there was a lot of work going on, and we'll get this right. And I'll just reiterate the point. We have all got skin in the game on this to make it happen, because we voted for your motion to increase the money, and we did. So this will happen. So don't worry, I'll be asking, and I'm on this as well, Georgina. So,
and it's not just to reiterate. I mean, my point about the delay and the damage of that's what you can't change that. But it is right, not just myself, but the anger within the community that's happened. If you give me assurance that there is a commitment to drive forward with this now, that is obviously important. But it's the community that need reassured, particularly, as I say, the impact of people sending their children to the academy, which would be if they actually felt, there's nothing like spades in the ground. There's nothing about seeing pictures. There's nothing about, there's nothing, one of the original plans was about, a campus, and there's room for a campus, and the cost efficiency, and the super facilities that you could share, and getting talking earlier, an FE college involved and everything. There's no excitement around that. There's no sort of talk about using it as a sort of campus model. And that's why, it just hasn't felt. I know a lot of work's been done about the reorganisation stuff, but the actual infrastructure and the building and the discussions, and as I say, the discussions that happen with the
we'll bring Audrey in, and then we'll draw this to a close, because I need to take two other items.
So I need to say something quickly, then Sue wants to come in. So actually, we haven't moved from what was originally in the agreement around, actually, whatever we build in Berwick needs to be a broad and wide, I'm going to put campus in inverted commas, whatever that looks like. It needs to meet the needs of school-age children, preschool children, across that whole of the system. It needs to meet post-16 and it needs to meet post-18 and support the economic infrastructure around what does industry need in that area. We have not moved from that. We have had several obstacles around political change, where we were due to meet the Baroness the Friday that the election was announced the day before. The meeting didn't happen. As it happens, I'm meeting the MP tomorrow in Berwick again. So we will be going through these phases. DFE are with us in the conversation. Some of this has to be informed by what we've done to get it absolutely right. So as officers, it is our job to do it in the right and appropriate way. I've got no doubt around the commitment. So I need to just check that, are we going to do something now? We are doing it. We have not stopped the pace at which we are working. And I need to say that really clearly.
Sorry, just the one thing that I forgot to mention when I was going on about buildings. Just to say that there was that mention about the popularity of Berwick Academy, and what I can say is the increase in the admissions for the last 2 years. There has been increase into year 9 for the last 2 years. So the people are choosing to attend Berwick Academy and also coming back from Scotland too. So sorry, I really forgot to mention that, but that's really important. It isn't a school that is losing pupils. Actually, it's reverse, and they're starting to gain pupils back.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to mention. People have got faith in Berwick. We should all have faith in Berwick. Marvellous. It's nearly as nice as Cramlington, Georgina, but not quite. Right, so if we can move on the agenda, the report of the Scrutiny Officer, the forward plan, you have that in front of you, and also the Family and Children's Services OSC work programme. Is there anything, Rebecca, you wanted to add to that? No. If you want anything on it, tell me. Please, come on, there's stuff we can add on there. We've had quite a good discussion this morning. I have no urgent business, so thank you very much for your attendance today. It's been a very meaty meeting, and we have taken on board your points, Councillor Watson, about the level of reports coming to this committee. So thank you very much for your time this morning.